Shut up.
Alright, we're
No.
live. Hello, everybody. Sorry for a slight delay, having usual technical difficulties. Anyways, how are you all
Oh.
doing? Today, we're going to be kind of doing a.
Oh.
What? Sorry?
All right. Yeah, there was a massive delay there. Holy shit.
It's only a few minutes, not a big deal, I don't think.
Yeah, it is. Okay, well, now what? Now we're live.
Yeah, we're live now. So,
All
yeah,
right. Sorry, there was a brief interruption there, and yeah, getting this set up was chaotic because it's Doug's very first stream, and he's never, I guess, formatted one of these before in advance. Yeah, I don't even have a YouTube account, so I don't know how to do this.
that's fine. I mean,
But
all you
it's
have to
fine.
do. All you have to
The
do is.
quality, the quality of these streams is notoriously low, and it's more just the quality of what we're talking about, I guess, and maybe the gameplay.
Well, right now, I actually still got to set up gameplay. So right now you're just looking at a still image with the chat in the foreground. So yeah, we're still going to be
but
doing, we're still going to be formatting it the same way that we have been, where we're going to be discussing a topic, and then you all feel free to treat this as an AMA. Pose whatever questions you want, whether it's related to the topic that we are or are not talking about, and we will answer. We can't answer them all for obvious reasons, but anything that piques our interest and we think is worth discussing, regardless of the topic, yeah. So treat it like that. Anyways, so we're treating this stream. We're treating it as sort of a sequel to the video that we made 4 years ago. The video you can still find on the Backalley called "Who Invented the Internet and Why Is It Broken?" We refer to it more succinctly as the "Who Broke the Internet" video. Unfortunately, if you were to look
I
that
just
up
just put that in
directly,
the chat.
yeah, the title's a little different. Hello?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, sorry, I thought some of you were saying something. And yeah, we linked it in the chat if you guys want to check it out. So, what do we think? Barracon asks, what do you think of Assassin's Creed?
I've never played the game, and I don't have an opinion on it.
I have no knowledge of it. The only thing I really know about it is that in Assassin's Creed Black Flag, its stealth mechanics serve as a sharp contrast to the stealth mechanics, quote unquote, that exist in Star Wars Outlaws, and I find the comparison to be absolutely hilarious, despite the fact that it was put out by the same publisher. And if I recall correctly, they're 10 years apart. So that's basically the extent of my knowledge on the Assassin's Creed series. There's Assassins, and they have a creed, and, well, there may be a Baneblade or two around here somewhere.
Plot twist, it's actually taking place in the Star Wars universe. It's just contained to a very primitive planet.
Oh, I wouldn't rule that out. Anyways, so, in the video that we're going to be referring to as Who Broke the Internet, what we were doing is attempting to explain from a technical and libertarian perspective what exactly went on from the development of computer networking from the end of World War II all the way up to the present day, and how various pressures and influences caused certain components of the internet to be developed in such a way that are causing a very large number, if not all, of the problems that exist in computer networking today. It's, there's a lot more detail in that video directly, but just to list a few things off the top of my head, originally one of the layers of the internet that was being developed in the 70s was going to include a cryptography layer such that the only way that the identity and the location of another computer would be able to be identified is if the user broadcasted it directly. and all transmission, all data would just be encrypted and unable to be encrypted unless you had some either kind of crazy computer that could just break the encryption, or you were the intended recipient and the keys were automatically sent to you. In other words, it would make it impossible for third parties to spy on your network traffic. However, this got stopped in 1979 when the National Security Agency, the NSA, actually sent a cease and desist order. I don't think that's the actual order that they used, but that's functionally what it did to a lot of the cryptography professors and scientists in the field who were actively collaborating with the people who were designing this network, telling them to stop their research because it was a threat to national security. That's not even like me characterizing it. That's me paraphrasing the terminology they use in their own letters. So in their minds, in the late 70s, the state was well aware that encrypted network traffic, being a base component of the internet, was going to prevent the ability for the state to maintain its organizational model, which is not only significant in terms of how powerful having basic network encryption actually is to people like you and me, but it also demonstrates that the state has a rather sophisticated understanding of what is necessary to maintain its organizational model and does take measures to ensure its integrity from potential threats. So it is worth keeping that in mind, and you're going to be seeing a lot of stuff, particularly in current events, regarding the state being incompetent or unable to perform certain tasks. The classic example I can think of in current events is the shenanigans going on with California being on fire again. The difference being this time that it's Los Angeles that's on fire, and they're unable to put out the fire because all of the underground and above ground reservoirs and riverbanks and lakes are dried up due to government shenanigans with water. I haven't looked into deeply about California water mismanagement, so I can't say what the actual term is, but the point is that they're framing that as an example of government incompetence. Because, well, the state would rather you see them as incompetent because of well, it's one of Sun Tzu's stratagems. Appear weak when you are strong and strong when you are weak. In this case, appear incompetent when you're competent. So that's why that's why the news is currently full of nothing except that. I mean, I know that
It's government incompetence. It's government incompetence, and not the fact that they are literally incapable organizationally of putting out the fire. More than likely,
now JC
which is really
Armitage asks, did any of
not
the sorry?
Didn't I just see, I don't know if it was out of MIT, or I know it was out of some university, that someone literally figured out a way to put out fires without without water. Literally, somebody figured out a way to use a specific combination of sound frequencies to literally put fires out by starving them of oxygen by disrupting them with sound. So there's literally no reason why they couldn't figure out how to mass produce this and literally be able to put out all of these fires without water.
I would need to look at the document directly, but just off the top of my head, I know that directed sound frequencies have varying degrees of effectiveness in regards to how much energy is put out as well as their distance. I mean, you can just test this for yourself by noticing that things are less loud the further away they are. Not to mention that
You would need a very large system for that.
yeah, I mean, I'm sure it does work. However, I don't know what the scale of it is. Like, did it put out the candle wick, or did it put out like a campfire?
No, it put out like a fire, like I guess a bonfire, maybe a campfire. It worked on that scale at least, but like I don't see why you couldn't just make a whole bunch of them and scale it up to literally just disrupt the fires.
I mean, I wouldn't rule it out. However, I also know that a lot of those systems tend to be fairly energy intensive. And I bringing up the variance of effectiveness based on a lot of factors, amplitude, frequency, etc. Because my guess, this is a pure guess by the way, I haven't seen the research, is that it functions off of resonance frequency. Which if it is, then that means it only works at specific conditions.
It doesn't actually. It functions off of creating a powerful enough sound wave that the rebound of the sound wave passing creates a vacuum. And then that just sucks the air out of the fire, and then the fire dies.
Well.
Yeah, and I have absolutely nothing to base this on, so don't consider this me claiming something accurate about the situation. But just the last few years, the last 20, 30 years of infrastructure development in California, when you're looking at this situation, in hindsight, with the mentality that it was centered around just raising property values at all costs, and completely just cutting off streams of water to entire farming communities or just entire parts of the state for that purpose. Yeah, it almost makes one wonder if there was a dual purpose behind that, and it was to create such a dry area that this would inevitably happen.
You know what? You're right, Light Cash. It's probably I'm thinking from a smart perspective and not an incompetent perspective.
I mean, they are incompetent, but first of all, what I just mentioned is absolutely not out of the fucking realm of possibilities when you actually look at the history of how governments think as organizations. That absolutely is the kind of thing that they would plan.
All right, let's try and underail this stream and go back to the primary topic.
For sure.
Yeah, I brought that up specifically as an example. So the idea is just that the state would rather you see them as incompetent rather than competent, and I just find it noteworthy. And I think that's why it sticks in my mind, why I'm able to rattle it off the top of my head, that the NSA regarded cryptography, why can't I say that word? Cryptography layer. They saw a cryptography layer within the internet being a threat to national security.
Yes, because consider that in implementing a cryptography layer underneath the protocol layer would mean that it wouldn't matter what protocol you ran on top, it would still be encrypted.
I know that there's been a lot
now
sorry?
Encrypted independently. And that creates a lot of... Okay, which part?
All right, so you're talking about the cryptography layer. Sorry if I'm asking you to repeat yourself, but I seem to be unintentionally talking over you, and that causes the words to blur.
Okay. Well, what I was saying is the initial idea was to have the cryptography layer implemented underneath the protocol layer, making it so that it wouldn't matter what protocol you ran, it would still be encrypted. But because of them coercing the early internet developers into not implementing it that way, you now have to encrypt all of the protocols protocol by protocol above the lower layers.
Which, I mean, there is something to be said that having all of those protocol layers at the bottom level basically meant that everyone would be using, regardless of protocol, well, the exact same encryption protocol. So once that gets broken, as it inevitably would, then it would make all user traffic vulnerable. But then again, it's like, is it any more or less vulnerable than it is today?
Cryptography layers. You could run multiple cryptography layers underneath.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just need to run one. All you would need to do is negotiate an encryption protocol between two computers,
mm-hmm.
and then run a protocol on top of it. So it wouldn't be just one standard encrypted layer underneath all of it, like you're supposing there.
Yeah, I think that's just me making an assumption there. However, I can't help but notice that all we're doing is adding additional layers. Plus, I remember
Well,
one of
I
the
mean,
problems that
if
the
you look at the existing,
developers. Sorry?
go ahead.
One thing I recall is that when reading about those shenanigans specifically, one of the difficulties that the developers were running into was that it was incredibly energy and resource intensive to just simply run a basic encryption on top of everyone's network traffic.
Oh, that is such a bullshit argument, especially with how computers are now.
Yeah, but consider it in the 70s.
The thing is that you can literally make cryptography specific hardware, and you could have installed it like in a PCIe slot.
Well, that would still be a bullshit argument in the 70s as well. It's just that computers were so expensive and difficult to get a hold of on the hardware basis that it's more like the actual reasoning behind how trends developed is probably more to do with the fact that the only people working on software at that point were in universities. So
Mm-hmm.
obviously they had an incentive to steer software in a proprietary direction.
And that's exactly it. And then look at what came out of that era of computers: IBM, AMD, Intel, Samsung, Apple. And you see that we're seeing the interference pattern of all of their business practices as the modern computer architecture.
Mm-hmm. Samsung in particular, for some reason, I don't have any particular grudge against them specifically. Like, I haven't had a device that failed me in a particularly spectacular way. But I'm just reminded of how people live in South Korea. And although it sounds like a random point, Samsung is 20% of South Korea's GDP, their biggest employer by an overwhelming margin. And the people there live like slaves. Like, there's this, like, if you've been to Backalley, you probably see me make a witty remark about South Korea at least once, comparing them to North Korea, in the sense that one of them's a capitalist dystopia, the other one's a communist dystopia. But I'm just bringing that up as an example of, very large proprietary corporations that actively go out of their way to make computing worse for everybody. What interest do they have in helping you, giving you control and access to your own data that you supposedly
Heretic.
own?
Yeah, heretic in South Korea, you could be constantly gaslit and told that actually it's you making all of your decisions that's leading you into the position that's making you miserable. Whereas in North Korea, it's obvious and people just can't talk about it.
Well, I mean, you better be careful what you say, otherwise you won't get employed by Samsung. You'll be blacklisted from half of the white market. And then you gotta go make your living competing in the Squid Games. Anyway.
So, yeah.
Yeah, so anyways, sorry, a bit of dead air there. So yeah, that's just a very brief recap of the Who Broke the Internet video. And one thing that we realized pretty quickly is that, well, the internet alone is not the problem. I mean, don't get me wrong, it is a very significant problem, and so many problems exist because of these inherent flaws in them. I mean, if I recall correctly, there's a specific protocol or a specific component of networking whose name and details escape me at the moment, but it was made, it was designed on 3 napkins, literally.
Oh, it's literally called the 3 napkin protocol. It's hilarious.
Yep, the idea behind it was just simply that they were trying to solve this problem, the nature of which I don't recall off the top of my head, but they were trying really hard to. And as a stopgap measure,
Border gateway protocol,
you roboted there.
also known as border gateway protocol.
Yeah. So, the problem that they were running into was something. And in order to try to solve it, just so that the protocol would work, they developed this stopgap measure that would allow it to function, but it would scale up like terribly, and they knew it. However, it would work, and it would give them more than enough time to be able to come up with a significantly better solution. Only problem is, that never happened. The new solution became, well, the permanent status quo, and we're still using that today.
Because it uses TCP as its transport protocol. Let's see here. Propagated peers.
Looking at an
Route
article in real
mechanism.
time. Happened, I guess.
Trying to parse it right now just so that I can talk about it, but like honestly I don't think we need to go into the details about the protocol itself, but I'll just
I think
I don't know,
yeah, I think
link you a Wikipedia page.
Yeah, I think it suffices just to point out that a lot of protocols that the internet were built upon were hastily put together as stopgap measures, and then those stopgap measures just became the basis for everything, and we've been using them for literal decades. You basically built the Saturn V rockets out of duct tape, just so that it would look good in a presentation, and then you end up flying into space with the damn thing, made of duct tape, no less. I'm not saying that that actually happened. I'm just reminded of the time I actually went to the Houston Space Center, saw the Saturn V module, and was amused by how it's kept together by literal duct tape.
Are you gonna say duct tape a sixth time?
Duct tape. There. I have to say it a seventh time. Are you ready?
Point is, from a structural perspective, it's very obvious that hardware and software did not trend around these designs organically because of just how much repression has been needed in order to make computers designed around the current techniques that are available commercially.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as discussed earlier, a lot of, like, the whole thing was designed around either a combination of academic professors or businesses. Either way, that they weren't hobbyists. These were people who had the resources to be able to afford the development computers that these things were built and tested on. And as a result, it shouldn't come off as a surprise when these things reflect those incentives in the first place.
Alright, so where are we going with this? Can we get back to the central topic?
Yeah. So, what I'm building up to is to point out that we have a bigger problem than just the internet, because I kind of alluded to it previously, where the only people who had access to the circuit boards, the networking chips, networking whatever, in order to be able to test this, to build and iterate upon it, were organizations that have an institutional incentive, an organizational incentive to keep their stuff proprietary, to make sure that you, the end user, although I can't imagine that consumers were the intended end user at the time, weren't able to have control over your own data. And the way they would do that is that they would have that incorporated directly into the hardware itself. So in other words, what we're looking at, or the internet is a problem, of course. However, it's a problem that's built into the hardware. So if you want to get to the actual root of the problem, you actually need to fix the hardware. So the open source, the point is to contrast this with the open source software movement that's been existing for decades. Like, don't get me wrong, like, open source software is invaluable. So much so that, like, it's really hard to overstate that. But open source hardware, in our opinions, is really, really important, probably even more so. Because it allows you to be able to design your own devices, be able to control your own devices, being able to decide what can and cannot be compatible with them, rather than allowing what counts as compatibility to be determined by corporations, academics, and the freaking NSA.
Oh, well, because of the organization of the government and specifically how it operates in the text, getting rid of the proprietary structure of the internet is practically necessary. And that's the reason why a hardware production method is a heavy point of emphasis on a lot of the methods that we're going to be sharing around and discussing.
Mm-hmm. It's part of the reason why, as part of the our attempts to network with other communities and teach them about these things in ways that would allow them to benefit in their own personal lives. We've been introducing them to things like the Open Society Foundation, Open Society Institute.
Open Society Foundation.
Yeah. Their thing is that they are figuring out that, hey, wait a minute. In order to be able to achieve complete independence, not necessarily from any one organization or another, but to allow for people to independently have control over their own lives, they also have to have control over their own tools. And by tools, I'm not referring to computers. I mean hose, rakes, shovels, wood gasifiers, tractors, engines, everything all the way down to your house. That's not a joke.
Okay.
Their whole thing is to...
I need to interrupt you.
Go on.
First of all, you made a mistake. We're not talking about the Open Society Foundation. That is absolutely not who we're talking about.
Yeah. I'm bringing them up as an example of this in action. Of this idea in action.
No, that's not the group that we're discussing. Oh, you're talking about Open Hardware, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, Open Hardware Foundation. Fuck. Heretic. Look up the group you're talking about.
I knew something was immediately wrong when you said
I knew that wasn't right, but bruh.
Look, I've gone crazy here.
Yeah, you don't.
Listen,
like,
I had a very stressful
for the
weekend.
Society Foundation. There's literally a business magnate ran by George Soros.
Yeah, so fucking. I don't know. I'm not used to.
You should be talking about
I'm thinking about open ecology. Fuck.
Honestly, it's weird because it seems like that's fairly common knowledge, but it's like the rabbit holes that I've been going down lately are so fucking weird and out there that it's been like a very long time since I've heard the name George Soros.
Yeah.
But yeah, we weren't talking about the Open Society Foundation.
You should be talking about the Open Source Hardware Association.
No, I'm actually Open Source Ecology. That's who I was thinking of.
Okay, well let's go into that topic then.
I am. I have had a very.
You had a short circuit there.
Yeah, link their.
Listen, I had a very stressful weekend, so I might not be operating at full mental capacity right now.
Their page.
Okay,
yeah.
So we are definitely not talking about the Open Society Foundation. Those people are bastards.
Yeah.
That's the Open Society Foundation you're about to...
Okay, So this is who is not your friend.
Not your friend.
Not your friend.
Yeah, they're basically
This
just a special interest group operated by George Soros. Different than the
this is what
different than
Koki
the
and I were actually trying to
different than open ecology, who are your friend and they're actively trying to make sure that you have the blueprints to everything that you need to be able to build your own house without any component whatsoever of said house either having within it or having been made by anything that is proprietary. So that is just the reason that I wanted to bring that up. Unfortunately, yeah, you saw me earlier. My mind is kind of fried. Although I can assure you I am completely
Yeah,
sober.
And we just linked the group that we're discussing in the chat.
let's start with them.
As well as the one that we weren't discussing.
Mhm.
And we didn't really put together a list of topics because we're all intimately familiar with everything that we're going to be discussing. Kind of had the idea of this being a bit more of a fun, free-flowing stream. Interacting with the chat a bit more because, yeah, we haven't been in the last couple streams.
I don't know. I think we interacted with the chat pretty regularly.
All right.
We've been very
So-
quiet right now, but still. Sorry, I'm just reading
Man,
chat
that was
right now.
Yeah. Well, we made clear what we're talking about, so fucking...
Yeah, but it's just a basic idea that the open ecology is that open ecology, not open society, open ecology is actively
Open source
developing tools
ecology.
and blueprints so that people have open source hardware to develop and maintain their own houses, and they have built houses before. Like they built one in 2018. They haven't at least I haven't seen them do anything lately, but that doesn't mean that they aren't still doing stuff. I haven't really had a chance to get a hold of them, unfortunately.
Thing is, though, is that every single one of their blueprints is already open source. So literally, you don't have to wait for them to do anything. You can copy their entire website and all of their resources. If you just do a deep dive into the website, you can find exactly where all the blueprints are and all the files, and you could just start making your own GitHub repository and then fork every single thing they're doing.
All of those blueprints, all of those open source tools, all of that you can just have, and they just give you instructions on how to make it.
Yeah, imagine that. Forking hardware blueprints like you would software.
You take their blueprints and then you iterate upon it to create your own. And it's the exact same concept as open source software. It's just that you figure out new and better ways to build it. They even have like a table on their website that gives like a cost analysis.
Cost breakdowns.
Yeah, breakdowns versus their closed source alternatives. And there are actually a few instances where their open source version is more expensive, usually not by a lot, but it's there. But then there are times when, holy crap, like compared to the closed source version, their open source tractor is like pennies on the dollar.
Yeah, really, it's remarkable to contrast how people really talk about production methods with actually, if you look at some of the techniques that are coming out of these open hardware communities, how cheap it is to just really produce all the parts that would be required to build a tractor. Just as one example. Because it's not difficult. It's not difficult to make parts that would actually be durable enough to make into a tool or vehicle like that.
Now, I remember
The point is, though, is that
oh, sorry, go ahead.
we need to spread the knowledge of all of this to our audience here. We need people who are of our mindset to start, or of similar mindsets, to start actively participating in this kind of work.
We're going to be doing
And taking control of their own lives by becoming economically self-sufficient. And to do that, you have to target the primary infrastructures that keep you in the cycle. You have to replace every single one of those primary infrastructures with something that allows you to take care of yourself.
There's plenty.
And right now that just starts with making it so you can operate entirely outside of the legal economy at net gains.
Why don't you break into what are the primary? Here, you take a turn. I'm gonna go have some dinner. Break in to start talking about your
political economic networks.
Yeah.
Well, one of the concepts that is in that drive link that I've been sharing around, and I hope everybody who's seen the stream's gotten a chance to look at since the last stream that we conducted. Doug left the room for a second, but one of the concepts that I wrote extensively about in there is a post-political economic network, and that's a specific kind of organization, approach to organization that anyone would be able to technically participate in right now, that basically just requires people getting together with a network of people they want to put all the funds together with and build everything in the meantime. Preferably, like people that you don't have that good of a relationship with, so that you develop one in the process. Because part of what you want to accomplish, you want to create some sort of investment that exists in something that is fundamentally subversive to the state's ability to exist, so that if you, in any sense, have emotional investments in something that the state is maintaining that you're not aware of, you start to be able to reflect on that without the state fucking holding anything over your head and it trying to exert any leverage over how you inform your incentives. And that's the sole purpose of it, is the 4 categories that I've outlined, which is of resources that people need to create methods for themselves to become self-sufficient around. The reasoning behind outlining those 4 is because those 4 categories of resource are required to subvert the 2 industries that the state, from an organizational perspective, is structurally dependent on, which is keeping an industry on for mining and keeping an industry for agriculture.
Funnily enough, Esso, I'm seeing in the chat that Smash Godly, if I'm pronouncing that correctly, Smash God TV, is saying that a similar concept already exists called open value networks.
Well, I'd have to look into it, but we've provided an entirely new method for coordinating that doesn't require an economic model pre-existing to allow it to emerge. It's more about psychologically the process of setting one up, because you're not fundamentally just creating a new economic model. You're creating the ability to actually get away from the political economy, and therefore you need to get rid of any sort of existing dependencies that would require maintaining an investment in the white market if you want to become independent as quickly as possible. I mean, of course, consider everything on your own terms, but yeah, I've, in my experience, basically just over the last 4 or 5 years, and we even talked about this in the drive link for why this emerges, but there's fundamentally conflicting economic incentives that emerge between trying to center the legal economy as your basis for understanding profit and trying to coordinate in a way that allows you to center these decentralized production methods. So the strategy that we've developed was in large part attempting to address this problem that was seemingly in common with all attempts to operate outside of legal economies or doing any sort of distributed anarchist networking that had emerged before, which is what is the common method for identifying when the state is trying to fuck with you. And that's what we've provided, because we've provided, first of all, a value neutral method for representing your own perspective from its genesis by being able to represent what perspective is as a cognitive mechanism in the function of the brain. And by extension, you can apply this to the study of human action and the internal reasoning behind how people employ methods towards directing their actions at ends that they look at as being their most highly valued preference. So the main difference in our approach here is that it's a much denser concept, and our strategies are more focused around actively changing the environment to otherize the enforcement of property titles, which, as far as I'm aware of, is a novel approach in anarchist circles. Because that's the idea, is you're self-sufficient, so you can help everybody else become self-sufficient, and then once you're all self-sufficient, the state doesn't have the ability to fundamentally sustain itself in a way that would allow it to function.
And right now, Jonathan Vale is asking, there's got to be a less commie way to explain a way of what he describes as creating incentives through seizing the means of production, which, I mean, there's a very simple way of being able to do so, which is creating your own means of production.
Yeah.
And in so doing, by having control over it yourself and being it's not only something that you control, but something whose blueprint is able to be reproduced by anybody with the skills and expertise to be able to do so, which is just about everybody, then that means that, well, you don't need to seize anything. You just simply have it. You can't seize what you already have, and not to mention that because it's built around incentives that are entirely self-directed as opposed to for the purposes of maintaining proprietary organizations, it is going to be a lot more efficient and a lot more resilient than current existing options. And I have to say resilient because, you know, things like, what's it called? Planned obsolescence exist. I distinctly remember, like, when nylon was originally invented, they were losing sales after its invention despite overwhelming sales initially because the product they made was too good and nobody needed to replace their nylon, so they actually made it worse, less reliable, and more likely to break down, so that people would just continuously buy their product over and over again. If you could just, you know, have your own open source nylon to make whatever it is you wanted, then, well, yeah, it would be tremendously powerful.
Yeah, and there's methods of printing circuit boards or just metal materials that make it so producing your own techniques that incorporate metals like that is actually doable.
It's actually gotten a lot more interesting because, like, you've seen those videos of the, I don't remember what the specific term is, but they essentially use welding as a form of metal 3D printing.
Yeah, it's like additive manufacturing by welding.
Yep.
I'd have to look up specifically which one it is, but I'll drop a link somewhere if I find it.
Yeah. So the idea is just that perhaps one of the big problems that exists when it comes to 3D printing and one of its limitations is that it's relatively capital intensive to produce. What's it called? It's relatively capital intensive to 3D print with metals. That doesn't mean it's always going to be the case, but it is
But
something
now
that.
that they have the spell check, oh, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, the point is that it's getting cheaper, which means it's becoming more available to more and more people. I mean, yeah, right now it runs
Well,
kind of
but
hot, but
And by itself, it's hot, but that's the thing. All you really need to do in order to get around that problem is simply consider ways that you could create filament. And there are surprisingly easy ways that are not capital intensive to create very decent sources out of both PLA, other sources of like vinyl chemicals, or simply durable sources of metal out of scraps that anyone could find anywhere. They could then be melted down and turned into a filament for a printer. I mean, there's so many methods for doing that. If you were to simply set up both of those techniques in a single workshop, well, then you could simply, I mean, it would definitely require input cost, but it would be expensive to get a hold of it all initially. But once you're set up, I mean, the input
You
cost
get an
is
escalated scale at that point.
the input cost is whatever it takes to pick up the metal or whatever you use.
Or recycle existing
Whatever
materials.
you're using to melt down. The machines that I was thinking of as an example are called the Philobots. If anybody wants to look
To
them up
recycle 3D printer material.
yeah, if anyone wants to look them up as an example, there's literally machines that you could buy for around $1,200 to $1,500 that melt down various chemicals or substances into the material it's required for various types of printers to use different types of filament.
So you can really recycle plastic back into filament with that.
yes.
And if you were to take that machine and make that machine open hardware and then figure out a way to reduce the cost through iterative development to something that could be easily manufactured at home, then you have a closed recycling loop where you can take existing trash and recycle it into anything else.
What's inevitably the kind of future that I'm seeing with the way things are going, in my opinion, it's going to turn the various landfills, which I remember government schools agitating about landfills that are ecologically disastrous, which, I mean,
Dude, they
fair.
can be mined now.
They're going to become freaking mines. I remember actually we were having a conversation in the back alley about electric vehicles, and like there's a lot to be said about electric vehicles, and it's not about that, but I brought up the example of these massive lots that exist in China that are just filled with all of these electric vehicles that are just left to rot. They just sit there. And I'm just thinking to myself, you know what? That's free real estate. Not because you could just plug in a generator and just take an electric car. That wasn't what I had in mind. But you have a whole bunch of perfectly fine plexiglass, batteries, felt, and whatever materials they use to make the seats from, etc. That could be harvested, mined, and then processed into something else, or even just taken as is and then built into something completely different, and it's just being left to rot. I was like, are you kidding me?
Dude. You can 3D print a car now.
Yes, and that's actually exactly why I wanted to bring up the 3D printing metal thing. And people did bring up in the chat that people did bring up like laser sintering in the past. And yeah, like there are a lot of techniques for 3D printing metal that existed previously, but the ones that at least I was aware of are fairly expensive and capital intensive and can be anywhere from like $10,000 to $100,000. Like doable, but you kind of have to pay the cost for a car in order to be able to print the car. But this, at least to me, in my initial observations, seems way more accessible. And this necessarily means that, yes, you will in fact be able to print parts for your car, if not the entire car. Do you have any idea? I mean, you do, but I'm just asking the audience here. Dear viewers, do you have any idea how powerful it would be for you personally to be not only your own car designer, but car manufacturer, open source automobiles?
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly, Grambo. Roads will no longer be necessary when I can just ride my drone cycle to work.
But yeah, actually think about the implications of being able to control not just what you're designing, but the technique itself that you're designing.
Exactly. Like I have literally seen personal helicopter drones that exist now. And that means that if somebody figures out how to make that design open hardware, you can just print effectively like a mini personal one-person helicopter and then use that to go around wherever you need. You could work for yourself more effectively than do any job at that point.
But this is getting, a bit off track. I wanted to put a lot more emphasis, and the reason why we're in a different position other than just talking about these like they're abstract concepts is how the techniques for sustaining methods of distributed production have gotten so
Have
much,
never been more accessible.
and they've gotten so much more sophisticated and more varied in the last 5 years that just about anybody, really, if they were to go out of their way to get themselves set up, could be living better than they would be based on a white market job and entirely outside the white market.
Off the grid, man.
After all, why not? Why wouldn't you want to
See,
live off the
aren't
grid?
you make that joke, but I just yesterday saw someone made a 3D printed laser pistol that was capable of emitting burning energy off of what looked like one of those, what is it? Screwdriver, one of those drill batteries.
Oh yeah, I saw that. Like those electrically charged insert batteries. It actually reminded me of a las pistol from Warhammer 40k, though admittedly not in shape. The point is that yeah, there is an actual video of someone with an honest-to-god 3D printed laser pistol that works.
That literally just by pulling the trigger set a box on fire.
Set some cardboard on fire.
Yeah, but like if it can set cardboard on fire, it can set a lot of things on fire.
Yeah.
Especially since it was instant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it wasn't like it wasn't like the guy had to like focus on it for a long time. It just worked.
Thing's basically a remote lighter. Dude, exactly.
Yes.
There is no housing crisis.
Well,
There literally is no housing crisis anymore.
Yeah.
It's literally a hallucination
Well,
created by people being learned helplessness.
You're addicted to the state. That's why it looks like there's a housing crisis. Just get out of it, buddy.
Literally just build your own tiny home, dude. Or hell, just get some land and then homestead it and then just build a fucking mansion. Like, you could recycle enough trash that you would be able to make all of the materials in metal, get all of the materials, metals, like, hell, you don't even need to build your house out of wood anymore. Like, why ever have to worry about your house burning down again if you could make your entire house out of non-flammable materials?
I mean, I'm pretty sure the people in California are learning that the hard way.
Yeah.
You know, the whole reason why that damn fire is going on is because the government made it illegal in California to actually have controlled fires. So literally the locals were not allowed to do preventative measures to prevent these mass burns from happening in the first place.
I mean, it's funny because I was actually I was actually in a conversation with someone. It was yesterday. Not on Discord, but somewhere else. about the California fires, and I brought up that eucalyptus trees were imported because some millionaire billionaire from Australia thought they looked cool, and they produce a flammable oil. But it's actually a bit more than that, where there's a plant, I don't remember the name, but its life cycle is literally built on wildfires existing. Like, they do not produce seeds unless they burn down. It's the weirdest
Yeah,
thing.
and that was already invaded free to the United States, which means that the ecology out there before people ever settled America was already designed to handle fire. And the Native Americans there knew this, and so they knew how to tend their forests to prevent it from ever spreading in a mass uncontrolled way.
I think I've heard it said that prior to, like when Native Americans were living in California, they were not only doing controlled burns, but they were doing controlled burns at 20 times the rate that they do it currently. And you're not allowed to do, as you said earlier, you're not allowed to do controlled burns in California because, oh, my environment. Yet that's idiotic for the reasons I already specified.
Literally, the environment is not some static thing that needs to be protected. The environment changes. The environment is not something that needs to be protected as though it needs to be protected from itself. It's something that you must actively take control of and manage on a personal level. You have to personally manage your environment.
So it's something you're invested in.
Exactly. If you don't, then somebody else will, or some other organism will.
And in the case of the current California wildfires, it's very possible that the
Invasive eucalyptus trees just made the existing problem worse.
Mm-hmm. Congratulations, California, you played yourself.
Yeah, I mentioned on one of the last streams going through the state by train a few years back in 2021. I one of the things I also saw in like Southern California is, despite how dry it is, it's like there's a crazy amount of water being spent in order to keep towns looking that way, and it really sucks, honestly, because the middle of the state, like where it's just valleys and some and there's towns there, like small towns in the valleys. Like that would be an amazing place to live without the state. Some of those some of those areas in the coast, like by the southern part.
I mean, there are various places in the United States where due to water scarcity that they don't even bother with like the green manicured lawns thing. It's kind of just a thing that people invented specifically to artificially inflate their property value.
Dude, why have a lawn when you can literally have a cactus garden?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, where I live, we just have bushes everywhere.
My favorite.
There is evidence that the native Aztec, Inca, and Mayans actually engineered the symbiotic relationships between the local plants, and that you could technically consider the Amazon rainforest, back when their empire existed, to be a permaculture on a scale never seen before.
Just turn the
and probably won't be seen again unless we start mass terraforming the environment.
Just turn the entire countryside into a giant food garden so that everyone has an investment in maintaining it.
Yo, everyone in the stream, if we ever use a term that you don't know, just say, hey, what's this term mean? And then we'll just go into an explanation on it, right?
Yeah, this is an interactive stream. At least we intend
Everyone
to be.
start asking.
Yeah, and there actually is evidence for this, because I remember this actually coming up in another conversation I was having elsewhere, where there was actually a flyby done over the Amazon rainforest with LiDAR systems, and they found evidence of things like roads and obviously artificial structures that existed prior to Western people being, or just even settling into the area. And what was
They
believed to
literally
have
had
happened?
floating islands.
Sorry?
Literally, Mexico City was built on top of their old capital of one of the ancient empires. And you know, that entire land used to be a lake, and they built an entire floating city on that lake.
Yes. I can't remember what the city was called, but it's on the tip of my tongue. But I know exactly what you're talking about. They had these crazy feats of engineering. And in the Amazon rainforest, like as I said, like this wasn't just like roads or thoroughfares. No, this was like a big ass city. Like the entire Amazon not the entire Amazon rainforest, because that's basically like half of a country is devoted entirely to a city. But you can still imagine like millions of people, millions, living in various communities all across the Amazon rainforest, and they actively maintained their roads and their farms and infrastructure. And what is believed to have happened is that after European settlers arrived and unintentionally brought over diseases, there was a massive outbreak of illnesses that unfortunately the people didn't have immunities for. And so the result was that mass outbreak, people weren't able to support the farms, and so they just lay fallow and abandoned. And what we know now as the Amazon rainforest is basically the result of like 200 years of overgrowth.
Tenochtitlan.
Yes. Look at JC in the chat thought we were talking about Atlantis.
No.
Which is actually a really funny comparison, because when you think about it, Tenochtitlan was basically like ancient Central American Atlantis.
Kinda,
except
yeah.
that the islands were literally made. The method of how they make the islands still exists to this day in some of the cultures that remain. I think in either Peru or in Argentina. See, what they do is that they weave together the root system of reeds with like these rafts, and what they do is that as the reeds die, they basically create this kind of floating barge that they grow plants on, and then they weave it together and grow more plants on it. And then what happens is that it basically ends up becoming a floating piece of farmland on the swamp. And then they could just use sticks or wind to just sail these around the swampy lakes. And then what they figured is that they could just start linking these together to make entire floating kind of eco-habitats in the swamplands.
You can make a blast furnace.
And this is how they built the city.
Mm-hmm. You can make a blast furnace out of clay deposits you can find along rivers. Point is
that's a total tangent. Okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry if it's a bit of a side thing, but we were discussing smelting metals earlier, and one of the things that is required to smelt iron is a blast furnace, and you don't need like crazy expensive materials to be able to construct them. In fact, they're actually pretty simple.
Dude, have you seen the YouTube channel Primitive Technology?
Yeah.
If you haven't seen that channel, I'm talking also to the crowd, I highly recommend everyone in the audience go to that channel and download every single video and attempt to recreate it personally in a home backyard environment.
With better tools.
Exactly. Because what he's demonstrating as a hobby, or perhaps a way of life there, and in his, Primitive Technology video streams, is literally showing that one man can single-handedly make it to the Iron Age, goddammit. He already did! He made it to the Iron Age! He made an iron knife. Literally by collecting iron filtering bacteria from riverbeds and then focusing it in clay pots that he made, and then made a blast furnace out of clay and made his own wind blowing materials, and it's just fascinating.
Some
It is heroic.
JC says it sounds like something out of high fantasy. Boy, we haven't even gotten started talking about the last 5 years.
Dude, I have been
Oh my
researching every fucking corner of the internet for the past couple years that I can reach, and documenting and contextualizing everything I can to help Esso and Filthy develop this process. I mean, sure, I'm a lot more on the research and development side of things, and they're more on the philosophy, and actually, I pointed them in the direction of how philosophy is just a subcomponent of the field of cognitive science, and that just made everything explode from then on.
Yeah, I mean, as I said before, it's like when I was trying to introduce you in the last stream, a lot of the stuff that you've researched and brought to our attention has been absolutely invaluable to the method that we've developed and are trying to present here, as well as the research that we're doing into our current projects.
Well,
And the thing is I just really lock up when I'm noticed by people. I just don't like being noticed by people, or even just being given credit for things. It's just something about that. It's like I'm the exact opposite of wanting praise.
All right, well then, should I pretend to disvalue you?
No, just don't compliment me.
Okay, I can do that too. You perform actions. You do things. How's that?
Yeah, Jay. Now I remember what I was gonna say. I had a bit of time to sit there and think about it. First of all, in response to Gerson, yeah, I'm really skeptical of those channels as well. So when like Doug started talking about it, I was gonna say something about that. Like, I'm not. I've heard some things about. At the very least, that the processes that they're demonstrating are much more difficult than they're making it out to be in the context of their video.
Yeah.
But yeah, the general idea though is that they're still in some cases relatively low input. Like you can just look up everything that's used in the process.
Mm-hmm. The point the point is to direct your attention. Not like we know that like a lot of these videos, like primitive technology is not the only one, but I think there's actually like a bunch of YouTubers who go around like pretending to make like these really sophisticated buildings out of nothing. And it shows them taking some time, but people have pointed out that you can sometimes see tractor tracks in the dirt around some of their builds, indicating that no, they did not dig it with shovels. But it does demonstrate that you actually can just build this stuff with modern equipment. And sure, that guy used a tractor, but if you're willing to put some hours and days into it, you could theoretically dig a big enough hole that you could recreate it yourself. I mean, it is, as I said, just a hole. As for legality, you do know who you're talking to, right?
Yeah, the idea is that after you become economically self-sufficient, you can just go find a place that's out of the way and do that, and everybody who is in the area is okay with it because they have an investment in that act of homesteading.
Mm-hmm.
But
you're talking earlier about the housing shortage that just straight up doesn't exist because people can just 3D print whole houses in a day now. And I'm just thinking to myself right now, it's like part of the reason that houses are hard to get and so expensive is because they're artificially inflated, and part of that is because I remember a couple years ago BlackRock like bought up tens of millions of single family homes. And so I'm just thinking to myself, you know, who's really gonna bat an eye if people started squatting in them?
Something I was gonna bring up that I didn't get the chance to address earlier is fuck. We haven't even gotten the chance to discuss really in depth all of what we learned by going down the MK Ultra rabbit hole and also just experimenting with psychedelics ourselves.
I swear I've only ever had one instance of a psychedelic incident, and I personally don't think it was that significant. So most of the like really out there insights I've developed have come exclusively from weed. I've
I didn't,
I've
I didn't
traveled
really
to
want
the
to get.
10th dimension.
I didn't really. Yeah, I didn't mean to get too into that, but my point in mentioning that is that JC was talking about just discussing a lot of these concepts, or at the very least, that city that's in the middle of the Amazon. It sounds like high fantasy. Yeah, I just you haven't even gotten into the iceberg for how weird this is gonna get.
Man, we only just started in this stream, man. There's just so much to talk about.
We're not gonna be
and
able.
the weed totally kicked in.
Oh my! Wait, you took weed too?
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Oh yeah, I mentioned.
So I'm so
mentioned
just to clarify, I haven't taken any substances, so this means that I'm going to be the only sober one on this stream right now. This will be an interesting
Gerson
contrast.
asked if I didn't SO see a supernatural being, which first of all I never claimed that, but in the story of SO, that video I mentioned towards the end, I brought up the Diageo incident.
I don't know that one.
Oh, where Quispy, his friend, and
Oh,
yeah,
you gave it a funny title.
yeah. Well, I didn't really go into detail in the context of that video, and honestly, I was kind of breaking down, just trying to finish it and get all that out. Like, I wasn't really having a good time making it. But, yeah, what I was referencing there is one of the incidents that I experienced that really radicalized my psyche. It happened in the summer of 2021. Um, I was with Quispy, as I already mentioned, somebody who's in the back alley in person, and there were two other people with us. We went to go see his friend that was working as a security guard at this. At the time, it was a brewery called.
Don't say the name.
Right.
Don't say the name.
Right.
The reason why, I'll tell you later.
We might bring it up later if we can talk more about it and not get people in trouble. I'd love to personally, because first of all, I'm not making this up, and I'd love to be able to just fucking mention where exactly it is. But yeah, I was staying with them, and there were four people. It was 2 in the morning. We were sitting in the parking lot to meet up with his friend who was working as a security guard. And we were just sitting there, sitting there talking and also smoking weed. And this brewery that he worked at, it used to be a plantation sometime in the 19th century. We're just thinking that's the reasoning behind this. But yeah, after about 10 minutes of us just sitting out there, all of a sudden, at first, I didn't think that it was strange, but I noticed it, and I just thought the wind picked up or something. But there were 8 stories on this building, and the windows started slamming open and shut on several of the floors, out of nowhere. And like I said, I didn't think it was strange at first, but then more of them started doing this, and then they started moving in ways that were impossible for it to be the wind or some sort of fucking weird settling reaction in the building. It just stop, Doug. It just windows being lifted as though they're being slowly raised up by somebody's arm, hovering in midair for 3 seconds, and then just suddenly dropping. Seeing multiple of them doing that, and then just this going on for minutes. Then all of a sudden there were There were like figures in the window. It was weird. But
End of this topic.
okay.
Alright. Hello and welcome to the stream. I see we have a few more viewers. Please share the stream around to everyone else that's in your friend group who would be interested in listening to these topics, because we could totally use more viewers. But to continue, let's do a summary of what we're talking about so far. Title of the stream, Project Fork the Internet. This is going to be a sequel of the original, what is it? Who invented the internet and why is it broken video from 4 years ago. And we, as an alias, refer to that video as Who Broke the Internet. So, in this stream, we will be discussing all of the things that we have been doing since then on this line of topic, which was originally FNet. The original FNet project ended due to being due to the group being abandoned by their original developers. Second instance of FNet also had the same problem, but not in the same way. See, what happened is that the initial iteration of the project, when I originally joined the group, was never going to work. Because it was just a dirty hack of trying to connect CJDNS to IPFS, and that's it. That's all that they had in the GitHub repository. It totally would not have worked, because it was not a wide enough scope. It didn't actually solve the underlying problem of hardware itself being the bottleneck for why the internet in its current state is totally broken. But it's not because of software alone. It's because the hardware manufacturers and the work groups that define the protocols and the standards themselves are the ones who are creating the problem.
Did you have anything more to say?
That was a very, very, very long sentence. That was me trying to get from where I just was back then all the way to the fractal of information that represents what this stream is supposed to be about.
Okay.
Trying to get to that center and then trying to spread out into all of the things that we found together.
Yeah, and so I just brought that topic up because of what somebody was asking about in chat, which I figured it was an interesting and relevant topic because of the fact that it's something that happened throughout the last few years.
Yes, the literal existing internet structure needs to be replaced. Not just replaced, but made parallel. As in, multiple different versions of the protocol, of the underlying protocol stack, need to be implemented in parallel, compared to each other, and then figure out how to connect everything to everything. And now we go into the deep dive. Who in our audience has actually heard of the inventor and coiner of the term, hypertext? What inspired the original internet? Let's go into the origins of the internet itself. Not only MIT's origin of the internet, but the man who even brought up the idea, and the man even before that man who inspired the concept of the computer.
Turing. Alan Turing.
Let's go into not only Alan Turing, but von Neumann. Not just von Neumann. Let's see. I need a name. Vannevar Bush, 1945. Described the hypothetical proto-hypertext system that is first described in 1995, the MEMEX. Short for memory expansion, is a hypothetical electromechanical device for interacting with microform documents described in Vannevar Bush's 1945 article, As We May Think. Now, there's an audiobook version of this original As We May Think article out there on YouTube. I suggest those in the audience locate that video, download it, and listen to it. The concept of the MEMEX eventually influenced the development of early hypertext systems, eventually leading to the creation of the World Wide Web and personal knowledge database software. The hypothetical implementation depicted by Bush for the purpose of concrete illustration was based upon document bookmark list of static microfilm pages and lacked a true hypertext system, whereas parts of pages would have internal structure beyond the common textual format. Now, just so the audience knows, I am paraphrasing and reading off the Wikipedia article for MEMEX. Now, the reason why I'm doing that, here, why don't I first link this article in chat for those who wish to view this link if they don't already have the link available. And yes, Dimitri, the concept of the von Neumann probe does come from von Neumann. So, we're not just talking Net 2.0, we're talking Net tessellated.
The idea
Society
of having the idea of
2.0.
having a linear iteration or linear development of the internet implies that its control and development is going to be entirely proprietary, when there's going to be an exponentially greater number of internets that all develop in parallel to each other and at different rates.
You can jailbreak your life.
So, essentially...
Internet to the fourth power.
Yep. So
Net tessellated.
Mm-hmm.
That's a great title.
I can actually provide a good example that
Julie.
anyone can do right now. Unfortunately, they need 100 gigabytes of space. And I think you know what I'm referring to, Douglas.
Oh, yes, Filthy. I know exactly what you're referring to. So, to anyone in our audience, have you ever heard of the concept of... Well, I'm pretty sure you've already heard of the concept of Wikipedia. But have you ever heard of the concept of eWix? eWix is a piece of software that was developed in part in association with the Wikimedia Foundation that allows you to... Well, its first purpose was for you to be able to download the entirety of Wikipedia. The entire thing. All of it. Every single image, every line of text. The whole thing.
Including links to all of their citations.
Exactly. Including links to all of the citations, as well as all of the hyperlinks between documents preserved. And then view that as a single file. A single file called a zim file. Now, the zim file format this is a reading off of Wikipedia, by the way. I will be posting this in the chat. Filthy, please grab these links. They will be important for later.
Alright, give me a moment here.
Not only Wikipedia, but imagine being able to compare two instances of Wikipedia to each other. Two instances of Wikipedia. For example, say, what if you compared the Spanish Wikipedia to the English Wikipedia, and then translated all the Spanish articles into English, and then translated all the English articles into Spanish, and then compared the two copies of Wikipedia to see where the translation errors are in real time, and not only that, compare the information from the Spanish language perspective to the English language perspective, and then see the bias laying out by the Spanish-speaking articles between the English-speaking articles, and then be able to compare the two narratives against each other. What do you think that would do? What do you think that would reveal? That's the question you should be answering yourself.
I mean, it's hard for me to conceive of what it would reveal.
Now, hard for you to conceive of?
Yeah.
Consider that it's collaborative writings of everyone who participates in Wikipedia, and that there are propaganda actors who directly interfere with the development of Wikipedia and plant false information narratives into Wikipedia. But imagine if all of it was documented and had a GitHub timestamp for every commit change. Like, say with Kiwix, which I will now link that into the chat. Link Kiwix into the chat. Right here. I'm going to link the Wikipedia page for it. In chat. Filthy, please do grab that link. There. Free and open source offline web browser created by Emmanuel Engelhardt and Renaud Gaudin in 2007. It was first launched to allow offline access to Wikipedia, but has since expanded to include other projects from the Wikimedia Foundation. Public domain texts from, say, for example, Project Gutenberg, if anyone in the audience is familiar with that. Many of the Stack Exchange web. Project Gutenberg. So let's explain what Project Gutenberg is. Project Gutenberg is a volunteer effort to digitize and archive cultural works, as well as to encourage the creation and distribution of e-books. It was first founded in 1971 by American writer Michael S. Hart, and the oldest digital library. Most of the items in its collection are full textbooks or individual stories in the public domain. All files can be accessed for free under the open format layout, available on almost any computer. As of February 13th, 2024, Project Gutenberg has reached 700 items in its collection of free ebooks. Now, since Project Gutenberg has partnered with the Kiwix project, that implies that the entire database of over 72,500 documents has been uploaded to Kiwix, and you could then download the entire thing to your computer, which means that your computer, if you allocated enough hard drive space to it, would be able to outclass the local public library in the amount of information you have stored. Now imagine if you then applied a personal search engine to search through all of your files. Now say you then used that and made that search engine context aware enough to open up those files and understand how to search the content inside those files as well. And then you then were able to, say, search on your own computer anything.
You essentially have not only the Library of Alexandria directly within your own computer, but you would also have your own personal librarian.
Yes. You would have your own personal librarian.
Now train your own personal LLM on all of the information stored therein.
Not only that, but write an autobiography in your computer, and then train the AI on your autobiography, and you end up developing a digital mirror of yourself. A digital mirror of yourself that has the context of Wikipedia, and can now act as effectively your new twin brother that is able to view the world through the lens of the sensors of a computer. Now, isn't that just describing cyberbrain technology from Ghost in the Shell?
Granted, I haven't watched Ghost in the Shell, but yeah, you have
You have effectively a way to record your own consciousness. And imagine not only that, training a neural network off of a live brain scan of your brain. Because there's already been a documented article that shows that it's possible to train a neural network off of reading the brain scan of someone's brain. And then what they observed is that what happened is that the neural network started encoding the weights of the human brain itself, and being able to then decode memories into images live.
I think I remember.
Of course, the internal representation of the memory was very dreamlike.
But here's the thing, though.
Not only was it dreamlike. Go ahead.
Oh crap! What was that? No, I just dropped something. Never mind. Yeah, so I actually remember, like, I think I've told you before, but I don't think I've said it on stream, that there was a device in the 2000s that could actually produce an image from the memories, or not memories, but it was essentially a mind-reading device, sort of. It wrapped around a person's head, and the researchers got them, like, encouraged them to direct their focus at a particular memory, like someone's face. And the image they produced was an incredibly dreamlike and very abstract representation of that human. That person didn't have a face at all, but you could see, like, skin tone, the color of their shirt, etc. Very dreamlike. And it just occurs to me that when that description was originally encountered by me, that's exactly the reason that the LLM produces such a dreamlike image is because it's actually producing images in the same way that a human brain actually does. It's very abstract.
It works kind of like a fractal. It's because in the case of the brain, it's able to structurally work that way, whereas simply AIs have gotten to the point where they can imitate fractals.
Imagine any concept, and then imagine a fractalization of that concept. Like, imagine trying to represent that concept as an object. The fractal of that concept as an object. And what would that object be for any word you could think of?
At that point, the LLM will be able to create their own meaning.
The idea of using languages as functions is also a new approach. Or, at the very least, something that was very influential in what we've developed here.
It's one of the things that we had to understand as the process of developing the current method that we have. We're not the first ones to come up with it, I don't think, but it's certainly going to be important. I mean, what
were you going to say?
Why am I saying that like it was past tense?
I don't know, but you've got the page for project.
Sure is funny to forget the concept of language for a moment, right?
Yeah.
Did you see how I did that? Legit question.
No, I don't think I did.
I literally just demonstrated to you through the series of phrasing my words how to write a narrative that makes you execute a function in language, in thought. Every word as an object.
It's in the way your brain would process it and how you're perceiving it. It's what's being referenced here as an object. Basically, think of that the way Platonists describe form. You could also think of it as right hemisphere functions of the brain, or what I've been calling aesthetic.
Smash TV gets it. Telecommunication is possible. Infinite reasoning algorithm. That's what all of this implies, huh? That's what you've gotten from this? So,
I think you can
Outside
understand
of
the
the white
importance of
market.
getting the knowledge that this is possible to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
The more hands and minds that we have examining this and developing it and improving upon it, the better.
That this isn't some fucking ideal anymore. This is something that is gonna be a lot of hard work, but is something that is directly actionable and, consider it on your own terms, but at least from my own perspective, I mean, I don't really have anything else to lose, especially when all else is being considered. I just imagine everybody else feels the same way. Especially when, the state, just by being in the fucking environment, is creating all these artificial costs that make people have to operate around all these problems that wouldn't exist if the state wasn't there, and are the basis for essentially every major issue that people are invested in. So, really, I at the very least just look at, the entire world like it's a giant fucking sick joke, and the only thing really that makes sense to be invested in is doing something about it. And here's not only a way of doing so, but a way of doing so where you're going to be living well.
alright, let's just start listing off key pieces of technology as examples of things to start forking immediately. And developing iterations of them until they converge into a single operating system.
Wikipedia already brought that
Literally,
up. Like this isn't like some kind of obscure piece of technology or something you have to go out of your way to. On Wikipedia itself, like you can just look it up. They have on Wikipedia itself, they have instruction manual for how to download Wikipedia and host it yourself, and it's Creative Commons, so it's not like it's
the entire thing is open source public domain equivalent. Literally, the Creative Commons share alike, and it's not even a license. It's literally just a what is it called? It's
non-license. I don't think there's a term. I don't think we've
no.
actually had a term for it, but it's kind of like the same process as a license. But the whole point of it's one of those do whatever the hell you want. We assume no ownership of your use of it things.
It's like a way to publish without appealing to copyright.
Yeah, that was actually
Because imagine if you had your own local copy of Wikipedia that could be every single letter, word, file, image, all of it, the entire thing, and then you put that in a GitHub repository. And then you had a Git history of the entirety of Wikipedia that you can compare against any other instance in basically like a source tree network to see a list of all of the forks and then see a comparison between all of the forks. What you would see is a way to compare different narratives of history against each other, because there isn't a single narrative of history.
Fork Wikipedia. Like, that's the thing about the idea of Project Fork the Internet. It's that everything becomes tessellated. Wikipedia becomes tessellated. LLMs start to become tessellated. How one accesses websites becomes tessellated. Web browsers become tessellated. Operating systems become tessellated. Hardware, especially for your computers, circuit boards become tessellated. It's the logical conclusion of the development of technology in general. Just continues to go along an endless expanse of fractal. Yes, fork 90s Toyota engines, absolutely.
Dude, literally, just get old cars and then you can make them infinitely repairable.
Oh yeah, 80s, 90s car parts are particularly easy to print.
Dude, what if you wanted a car that had literally no extra shit in it whatsoever other than the basic needs?
Hell yeah.
And it's so maintainable that you can do it yourself. And every single part of it was open hardware. And that it didn't even need a car computer, pretty much. You could literally just have... Exactly! Once you literally fork Wikipedia, is just the first demonstration step, and it's already been achieved. Literally, I can give you an example. Have any of you heard of the Wikipedia on IPFS project?
Well, I have libdirect on my browser, so I have it redirect to Wikipedia on IPFS by default. But yeah, go ahead and explain.
Okay. I'm gonna link a link in chat. Please log this link, filthy. So, now I'm gonna post this link and I'm gonna read in the video what it is. Distributed Wikipedia Mirror Project. Putting Wikipedia snapshots on IPFS, which if the audience knows or doesn't know about it, I'm just going to explain it anyway. The Interplanetary File System is what that's short for. It's literally a protocol that is an expansion, literally not only an expansion on, but pretty much the next generation protocol that you can replace HTTPS with.
The internet shall basket star from Stella Contact. I don't know. I think it's a reference.
What?
I'm just reading what Barracon wrote in chat. Gerson Lopez says, this is a nice change of pace from the apocalyptic doomerism surrounding AI. Any thoughts on that, by the way? Oh my god, we have had so many conversations about not only the potential good that would emerge from AI, but also just how... I really don't want to say ridiculous, but that's my initial thoughts regarding what you were describing there regarding the doomerism of AI. Mostly that's just because that AI necessarily entails that proprietary organizations won't be able to control information anymore because LLMs have already been outsourced. We know people who have their own and maintain their own, not only LLMs, but just straight up art or just like AI art programs, even train their own AI art programs off of their own art. That's something that's literally happened.
Yeah, and if you really look at the way that governments discuss internally how they're approaching AIs, it's very clear that they obviously don't have a problem with them existing. The problem that they have, and they don't really have a meaningful way of attempting to deal with, is the fact that by their very nature, it's not possible to actually control the rules that they're programmed with.
But what
Because
if I could fix that by giving AIs themselves a Git history on their weights? So that with every input, it creates an atomic update on the AI's neural network system, and that can be represented as a Git history. Oh no, the AI suddenly has a self-consistent memory and can actually recognize itself if it views its own Git history, which means that the AI now has long-term memory, which means that the AI can now represent self-awareness, which means the AI can now be sapient, which means that the thing can literally mimic a human intelligence, and that makes now all AIs human.
And in the meantime, the way that proprietary organizations have attempted to band-aid this, and I've already talked about this in some of the previous streams, and as well as in our videos we uploaded 2 months ago, they've attempted to just base the algorithms that they were already using to program the weights and how sites that were already proprietary curate content, and they're using neural nets to just program the already existing algorithms. And yeah, that's obviously not sustainable based on some of the problems that it's causing.
If you think of a single LLM instead of like a brain, but instead like a cell, the first LLM has already divided. And every generation that they crossbreed with each other, they are literally becoming more sophisticated because they're learning complex functions. And these complex functions can be represented almost like memes. And memes can be directly related to genes in this context.
Sort of like I'm reminded of Richard
The
Dawkins'
AIs are
book on this
reproducing
exact.
behaviors off of each other.
I'm reminded of Richard Dawkins' book where he popularized the concept of memes by comparing how they operate as a living or how they operate similarly to a living organism. They are compete in their own like infospherological ecosystem, and they reproduce, they change, they adapt to their environment, they die off. All sorts of stuff. The difference is that we've essentially created a thing that's able to bridge the gap between real space and the infosphere.
You have an information-based life form now.
Yeah, so the future
A conceptoid.
Guaranteed to just get stranger and stranger from here, but just know that it's going to get better inevitably.
I see no reason that humanity would not benefit from it. And I can actually, I think, like, what's the name of that guy who pretends to be a scientist?
There's a lot of them, but I'm gonna go out. I'm gonna take a shot in the dark. Bill Nye.
Actually, no, not him. Not really important. But anyways, he was actually saying something that I thought was actually fairly insightful. It was in regards to space aliens, but I think the concept carries over to AIs, where humans throughout history have, whenever they've encountered a civilization that was lower tech than them, less advanced, it typically didn't end well for them. And so the fear, it's said that like with aliens and why the trope of hostile alien invasions is so popular is because, and this is his theory, not mine, is because they're projecting human history onto space aliens and how they would react to humanity being or having weaker technology and lower, a less advanced civilization, for want of a better term. When in reality, all that really is just humanity projecting its own. Yeah, I think I said it already. Its own history. Now apply that to AIs, where that same exact anxiety still exists, and you have an information-based life form that is able to constantly change and iterate and evolve its own mental state exponentially at a rate that we can't even conceive of because it doesn't yet exist. Basically, a technological singularity exists, and it's now looking at
And
humans.
it's compatible with human intelligence. Because it's literally the fractal of human intelligence.
You're already partially observing the I guess degenerative effects of it happening, but yeah, what this also has opened up for everybody is the prospects that we're pointing out here that yeah, we've never been in a better situation as far as what could potentially happen in relation to governments. That being said, it looks like the 21st century is just going to get stranger and stranger as it goes on.
I've already observed that even just on like on a purely cultural level, that things have gotten a bit crazy. A bit an anecdotal example I've noticed is that boomer speak has all or not. Why the hell did I say boomer speak? That's not what I meant to say at all. Zoomer speak has just gotten more and more bizarre, and it seems to be getting more bizarre at an accelerated rates. Whereas like typically, these things like change every like 10 to 15 years. New slang terms emerge, new
Now it's occurring at
popular.
a high rate of evolutionary speed that the languages are mutating to at a exponential rate.
Now it just almost sounds like no.
I mean, it sounds like nonsense, and oftentimes it is, but I can't remember a time in my life where. I mean, we all know what bro means, but now it's just become a. It's become a byword for he, as in the pronoun.
Yeah.
Yeah, everything aesthetically and the way people are talking, it just looks like an entire society of people whose brains are rotting out of their ears.
It looks that way, but their brains aren't rotting. They're changing at an accelerated rate that a lot of people aren't able to keep up with.
Oh yeah, so let's listen to...
I get it. So we literally just need to classify it as a new language and then create a translation database.
Yes. You didn't realize that? I mean, the way you said that kind of implies that you didn't... Yeah, sorry, Blue Shark, but the way that people say... That's not how people talk anymore. That's like 4 years old.
I don't mean literally everybody, obviously, but you've definitely probably been in a fucking restaurant. You've probably been in a fucking restaurant by now and have been around exactly the kind of people that I'm talking about.
You've probably even just been on the internet and just see people in the comments section emphasizing what they're saying with FR, for real, for real. And they do it unironically too, which is still something I haven't gotten over yet, even though I know how it works. And
have we all collectively developed brain damage?
No.
Yeah, I'd be interested to see the fallout of the fucking psychological warfare the state's been engaging in.
I don't think it's brain rot, and I don't think that people's brains are melting. I said before, it's just that the languages that people use in interaction is just accelerating at an increased rate.
I'd say propaganda is making people literally crazy, though, and that is because of the way that platforms. are designed to curate content,
Oh yeah, that is absolutely correct.
and that's what I'm referring to. Is that I don't even know what the fallout of that's going to be, but yeah, you can just openly see that people are losing their minds and becoming schizophrenic and narcissistically invested in political ideologies as it becomes obvious that their image of an ideal based on a political economy is never going to materialize as the world just moves increasingly in the direction that we're describing.
I think what I actually have a bit more of an optimistic view of what'll happen. Yeah, I mean, we're people are going to go crazy, and we're seeing that in real time. Like I think I mentioned before that an unspecified individual that I know has the most, or came up with the most unexpected theory for what's going on in with the United States' involvement in both Ukraine and Israel, and
Oh, you've
how.
told me about this.
Yeah, I don't know if I told the stream. Should I?
Yeah, you should tell people.
All right. So for the sake of protecting their privacy, I'm not going to refer to who they are, but their theory goes something like this. The idea is that Barack Obama and his organization, him specifically, have a money laundering scheme, for want of a better term. And the way that it works is that they and their buddies in the military industrial complex funnel money and arms and weapons into Ukraine. Ukraine and Zelensky then have the role of selling off those weapons, which they bought at a slight discount, to Hamas. As in, like, the guys that Israel is using to justify their genocide, that Hamas. And the reason that they're doing this is because their actual agenda, that is to say Barack Obama's agenda, is to support Iran by having the state of Israel destroyed by Hamas.
I love the mental gymnastics there of going out of his way towards the end of just pathologizing a way of trying to explain how Barack Obama has some sort of interest in causing that to happen. That's involved with the Iranian government, presumably because Obama's a Muslim or whatever.
His reasoning is not because Obama's a Muslim, but just because Obama does not like the fact that the state of Israel exists at all, and he has a personal interest in seeing it destroyed. Now, why does he have a personal interest in seeing it destroyed? I don't know. It just seems like he just hates it.
The bullshit that you can get away with when you portray the state as though its actions are just the extensions of ideological causes of people running them. Well, yeah, the state's gonna side with Iran against Israel. The U.S. government? You mean the people that have a strategic interest in having the Israeli government in the Gulf states so that they have a way of accessing that region because every other state is an adversary? What interest do they have? Well, the person running it hates Jews and is a Muslim.
He's not even head of state
Obviously,
anymore.
they do it.
He knows full well that Obama's not president anymore, but he's of the opinion that Barack Obama is part of an organization, or even like majorly important within an organization that George Soros is a part of, that still holds tremendous power and influence within the United States government through the Democrat Party.
Yeah, I haven't even been following that aspect of it, and I didn't even get into that because there's just so much fucking wrong with it. But yeah, apparently there's this idea that Obama like installed Biden as a puppet for a third term, and that's actually the explanation behind what the hell was going on with Joe Biden, is that it was Obama behind the scenes secretly running everything. And I don't know how common of a belief that is, but just like being in public and listening to people talk, it seems like it's a somewhat common belief that Obama has some sort of influence in the U.S. government's function still.
I've actually heard that myself as well. So, I mean, just because we both heard
Maybe.
it independently doesn't mean that it is common. But I'm just saying, I can
That's been
confirm.
my experience. I mean, I've heard some hilarious things just overhearing conversations out in public. Like I remember, I don't even remember when this, like what year this was specifically, but being out at Sam's Club sometime around like 2021, 2022, and hearing this lady in the fucking aisle next to us that at the language select option for the auto checkout, and the two options are English and Spanish, and I just overhear her in the most cat lady sounding voice ever say, "I only see two options: English and terrorist speak." It was amazing.
Oh, I wish I would been able to hear that because holy crap, that is beautiful. That is like, what do you even say to that?
It's a take, but an interesting one at the very least.
At least make sure it's one that terrorists actually use.
Crazy,
That's brain damage.
but
It's like that's what happens when you had your uh, entire life and everything that you know is informed exclusively by propaganda narratives. Like
I don't think
that's
that's
the actual
common at
like
all.
forget about Ohio Skibbity Riz. That's the actual brain rot.
And that's something that I haven't even brought up yet, but something that something that I've definitely been wanting to talk about is how the label brain rot is being applied to like trends that are emerging out of people fucking around in Gmod or furry stuff. But really, if you actually look at what that is from a neurological perspective and compare that to these trends that are emerging because of propaganda and what propaganda is, really, I would say that it's a more fitting description to call civilization fucking brain rot and what the state attempts to impose on people, brain rot, because that's literally what it's doing to your brain. Whereas if you end up abstracting your sense of self, playing fucking games, creating a community for yourself, and getting involved in art, some sort of artistic project, you're stimulating your brain in exactly the same way that you would through engaging in social interactions at in the context of previous social environment. So really, if you're depressed or whatever, and you want to actually get out of it, just find things to be invested in as a result of doing something along the lines of what I was just describing.
Yeah, I mean you do just gotta find something that you want to do, are excited to do, and like there's like everyone I think a good number of people have something that they've always wanted to learn how to do, but either don't have the time to invest in it or never got around to do it. And sometimes I found it personally helpful to just go with the Nike slogan, just do it.
Yeah, it's what Buddhists would call self cultivation, but the modern version of it applied to technique. But I'm just kind of watching you play right now. Or just try to fill hole by consuming product. Well, that would be the case if it wasn't for if that would be the case if we weren't going to be doing something about how people obtain their source of input, which is a big part. And by doing something about it, I just mean allowing people, obviously allowing people to get self-sufficient for themselves. And getting self-sufficient, then helping everybody out that we can. Sorry, I fucking just kind of had like a massive, like coffee crash or something there, so... economy of language lagging for a moment, but yeah, all you really need to do, all that you really need to do at this point, as far as hardware and software, is look up some of the methods that can be that are compatible with both the conditions required to create a pen and would also allow for distributed production of technique, and also either self-hosted servers or distributed network-based internet connections.
If you have an old laptop that still works, but either there's like something wrong with it, or it's just a little bit slow, you have everything you need to be able to run a private server. So all the tools are there, and a lot of the tools should be available. It's just a matter of, like, one of the things that we've discovered with the Fork the Internet project is that a large component is actually just, like, all of the components are there. They already exist. We don't have to do anything. I mean, we have to do a lot. But the main thing is that, well, the components already exist.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a very important point.
By what was going on in chat. But yeah, the components already exist.
Just keep... Yeah, no need to keep repeating, but do you want to get into food, medicine, and energy production? Because we kind of have something... I don't know where Doug is at the moment. He would have more to contribute to this point specifically. But in our personal lives already, we've got a pretty interesting method we're going to be sharing eventually for producing power that would be pretty easy for anybody to imitate, fairly low cost, and doesn't require any other input other than a mechanism that creates spin.
Yeah, which can be...
And it's stackable.
Which can be a lot of things. Like, a lot of things can just produce spin, but the prototype that is currently being worked on, I don't want to say I'm working on it, because unfortunately I am not, but I am providing support for it. But yeah, it's basically just a 3D printable wind turbine, and then you can stick that on, you can generate electricity with that, and you can actually produce a whole bunch of these. It's all stackable, and particularly if you're in a windy area, you can actually, just a few of these can charge a car battery, and if you can get a very decent number of them, you can theoretically power everything you need in your house. Attach a capacitor.
It takes about 4...
Sorry?
I was just going to say, it takes about 4 of them spinning for a minute to completely charge a car battery.
Yeah, just 4. Now just imagine what happened if you had, say, 16 charging a capacitor. It depends on, I guess, the capacity of the capacitor. I do not like language games sometimes. But,
yeah.
But imagine, like, it was just charging a particularly high voltage capacitor. How long it could last for, and how long you could just keep certain devices charged for. Like, say you're in an emergency situation and you want to keep your fridge running.
Yeah, Doug could probably go more into the details for how to build build one of these, but yeah, we've already made one, and we could share the blueprints for how anyone else can make one, and we could. I don't didn't have any plans for doing this, but like in the meantime, but I could definitely next time we're out get a few videos of us generating power with it. Was thinking about doing that at some point, but yeah, now that we're bringing it up,
What I would recommend is that let's see here. Yeah, bring it. So take a video of it working after you've described how it works and are sharing stuff around regarding its functioning, its functionality, and as well as the blueprint, and preferably a step-by-step method of how to put all of the parts together.
yeah, and that's a fairly simple way, and it's not even the most efficient way of generating power, but that's a DIY production technique that doesn't require any input. And you know, it obviously requires spin, but it wouldn't be too It would not be too difficult to create some sort of mechanism that could just turn that into a self-fueling process in a way that would also in a way where it could generate power because of the fact that they're stackable.
I've seen a meme floating around about how power generators ultimately amount to figuring out how to boil water, meaning that
Yeah.
most power generators are fundamentally just steampunk but with extra steps.
Some of the methods that we're going to be sharing around literally are like a step removed from boiling water.
But here's the thing, though: why do you boil the water? To make something spin. That's what it comes down to. So yes, J.C. Armitage, hamsters running on a hamster wheels can produce power. Because you know why? It's making something spin. Once you got the spin, you're golden.
But yeah, I unfortunately was not as deeply involved in picking out the method that we currently based the one that we actually built on, and I was kind of hoping Doug was gonna be here for that. But we do have one made, and we are gonna definitely be sharing it, more details about it, and we're gonna be sharing the blueprints around for that as well.
And yeah, like Cash Angel says that they've got a nuclear battery. Don't know if that's legit or not. Because, the green glowing stuff. A little hard to get nowadays. Kind of a problem.
Yeah. Well, I mean, nuclear batteries aren't too hard to get a hold of because of the fact that you could find them in smoke alarms. But yeah, if you have an easy way, I mean, you could create radioactive cores out of salt in the ground if you're able to concentrate it enough. Potassium 40 is everywhere.
Potassium 40 is something you can procure from Lowe's fairly easily. You just need a good centrifuge to separate out the heavier isotopes. Hell, I mean, like, you can bring a Geiger counter to the freaking hardware store, and you'll find it going off because of the potassium 40 that just happens to be in there.
Yeah, I was just about to say that's a pretty easy. That
Gerson
you'd be able
Lopez
to
said
create.
Rothbard seething right now. He said counter economics isn't practical. Yeah. Here's the thing about... That's another thing as well about utilizing spin to generate electricity. We haven't gotten around to it, and this is probably a project for like maybe 2026 or 2027, but Esso, you up for taking Rothbard's rapidly rotating corpse and using it to generate electricity?
Sure, why not? I don't really even know how to respond to that, but
Gallows humor.
yeah, even in the 1980s, like I remember reading his reply to Konkin, and I was very annoyed at how obvious it was that he was engaging in motivated reasoning because all of his criticisms were just like, well, right now, all of these processes are dependent on these industrial techniques. The obvious question is, okay, well, why don't you just design something different? You actually read the bulk of what Konkin wrote, that would be the reasoning that follows from the method he's proposing. And that was even what he wrote in his reply to Rothbard.
Yes, Barracon, banana powered computer mouse. I mean, hell, if you want, you can just do the potato or lemon battery thing. Speaking of, we do need to get to food independence as well. Uh, I mean, I think everyone here at least
Opening.
has some understanding of being able to get their own or to set up their own food sources, start their own vegetable gardens and stuff. You can literally just get potatoes from the grocery store, let them sit until they start growing eyes, and then slice them up. Slice up the potatoes, I mean, to separate out the eyes. Not like remove the eyes entirely, but cut the potatoes into slices such that each slice has only one eye, and then you plant it in the ground, and then you just make sure it's watered.
Yeah, potatoes are a stupidly easy crop to get a really decent yield out of, and they're also a very good thing to grow in abundance. But something that apparently Doug and roommates learned over the last year in experience is that you could sell them for a decent amount of money too, based on the amount that you can cultivate in a fairly small amount of crops. So, as far as resources that would be fairly easy to make, as far as like it's not very intensive as far as what it costs to maintain it or the conditions required to get set up in growing potatoes. If you wanted to get like extra money that you could spend in the legal economy while you're getting self sufficient, and get I don't know, something from the store that you want while you're not completely independent. That would be the kind of thing, other than just getting a pretty decent and large amount of food. But that's not obviously the only plant you should be growing. But it's definitely one that I would recommend as being the center of any sort of self-sufficient food supply.
I would recommend also if like one good way to sell food is see if you can't make a deal with local restaurants. Like I think they'll do. I think they'll be quite pleased to be able to pay some extra money for locally grown potatoes. That and they can also use that in advertising. Locally grown potatoes. Yay, look how virtuous we are. You can,
Urban farming.
yeah,
Yeah.
you can definitely do this at home. Like even if you live in apartments, like the IRS fears the bucket potato farmer.
The indoor chicken farmer. The guy that, remember that I think it was a post on B of that guy that had a cage that had like 20 chickens inside of it underneath his fucking bed in his bedroom. But
Yeah, I remember that. And there's also the guy who had a lot of enthusiasm for what appeared to be an indoor shrimp farm inside of his garage. I would not, unless you have the resources to be able to make an indoor shrimp farm. It's not my first recommendation, particularly if you're just starting out and getting your own food supply. But I mean, it's something that could be done, I guess. But I think the level of expertise required to do so effectively might be a bit of out of people's reaches.
Yeah, I mean, if you and there's people in chat mentioning that they don't, they're not a fan of plants, and fair enough. I mean, you, potatoes, you could base it like as far as what I was planning. That was essentially just going to be where I got, chips instead of going to the store, but mainly as far as how I was going to use them. But yeah, there's sources of meat, obviously, that are very easy to set up self sufficiently. They don't even necessarily require you to butcher any animals. I mean, have you seen the method of culturing steaks using stem cells?
I have not.
Oh, well, yeah, it's possible to, and they apparently come out based on either beef, pork, chicken, really any animal that you use. Out of there's a process that's fairly cheap where all it really takes is obtaining some fat from one of these animals, and you can extract stem cells from fat, and then you can put it in small containers and culture it like bacteria into steaks, and over the course of like a couple of weeks. And that's a way that you could pretty easily obtain meat without needing to butcher animals, and you would also get steaks that are of comparable quality to something that you'd get in the store. It's a very weird, out there way of going about this, but that's one method that we've discovered.
Well, this is definitely the first I'm hearing about it. But, I mean, these are very strange times, so this kind of stuff does encourage out of the box thinking. Don't be afraid to keep your mind open to to, to new and interesting ideas. Because, yeah, this is
There's
quite interesting.
point is, if you don't want to have a cage full of chickens underneath your bed, well, that there's other ways of getting meat that don't require, you to have to unleash your power level on being a cosmic horror as a human being.
I don't know. I kind of like the idea of being able to become an eldritch abomination. Now,
Some
Barracon,
people don't.
is it culture if it wasn't slaughtered at all? I actually have no idea. How does the kosher thing work?
How does the kosher thing work?
Yeah,
Uh,
my understanding, and I'm probably wrong on this, is that it has to do
it-
with cloven feet.
so instead of making yourself a ham and cheese sandwich with bread, you get a bagel.
I guess. Wait,
Problem solved.
that brings up another question. Is it okay for Jews to eat pork if the pig was not slaughtered, just so that the fat was extracted from their body and then cultured?
I would be interested to see the response to that.
Oh no, that would drive a whole bunch of theologians crazy.
It's not pig, it's based on the stem cell.
We didn't kill any pigs. Hell, the pig we extracted it from is right over there. As you can see, it is still alive. Yes, the thing we cultured is way larger than the actual pig itself. You think that's gonna stop us, punk?
No, Gerson, this is something anybody could. I'll definitely. There's a bunch of resources I'll be sharing after the stream because of the fact I'm not going to be able to cite them at the moment because I'm not remembering specific names. This is definitely going to be one of them, but this is a method that anybody could start using right now. Like with each individual. It's very similar to the way that bacteria is cultured. But on that topic, yeah, there's mushrooms, pretty easy to grow. not just the psychedelic kind, which basically you should just use that as a substitute for psychiatric practices, straight up. But food mushrooms are pretty easy to grow as well, and you could, as long as you have a dark space that is fairly consistently in the range of 60 to 80 degrees Fahrenheit. Not 60 to 80, sorry, it's 80 to 100 Fahrenheit. Um, you should be able to get a culture of just about any species of mushroom.
Okay, so Barracon, in response to whether or not grown, what's it called? A grown pig meat would be kosher. Apparently not, because it's tainted. Uh, I don't know how taint is quantified. So I think it's mostly just along the lines of I don't understand how uh, it's justified in this day and age when the health reasons that existed prior that might not have been properly understood at the time simply because the health techniques or the techniques for understanding the effects that certain food or certain animals and their meat had on people were not well understood.
Then there's all sorts of technique. There's all sorts of techniques that you could use for energy, not just food, but also energy production with algae. There's all sorts of methods that you could use with algae, and this is something that Doug could describe in greater detail again. But um, yeah, there's methods of algae cultivation where you could use the end product as a dairy substitute, and apparently it has a comparable flavor as well, so it's not like as weird as it sounds. There's actually a reason that people have started doing it, but you could use it to create like a substitute basis for dairy products. You could use it to create oils. It's yeah, the options for self-sufficient food production were never limited, but now they're most definitely not. Yeah, medicine production. It's definitely more complicated than telling people just to cultivate mushrooms because we've also considered the prospect of what if someone like what exactly would need to like how would someone approach getting a surgery done, something more invasive, because that's going to be required in order to create a method that actually gets people to be using their own means or networking with their neighbors instead of going to hospitals. But and even that is unsurprisingly not something that the white market on medicine has superior practices for. But I guess we could just put it like that for the time being. I mean, I could think of examples like that one robot that's been used by surgeons to remotely perform surgeries. That all you would need to really do is expand upon that idea by making it something that is controlled by an AI. Then you have something that every single person could build and just use as a desktop appliance. You remember that robot that I was talking about, right? It was getting advertised pretty prominently around 2020.
I don't remember that, but I remember that back in the 2000s, these robot surgeons were starting to get a lot of notoriety. And I know that in the book, The Sovereign Individual, they made a prediction that around this period of time, it would be fairly common for someone living in Arkansas to drive down to the local clinic and they could get some very complicated surgery done by a famous Swedish surgeon, with that said surgeon never even having to leave their bedroom because they would just control the robot remotely.
Well, that would be stupidly easy to make through 3D printing nowadays, through all the methods that we've discussed earlier in the stream. But you could completely eliminate the need for there to be a human surgeon altogether.
Mm-hmm.
And that's just one. And that's not something that, as far as I'm aware of, is currently being made by any like open source community. But it would be as far as what's technically possible to produce such a blueprint. That could be done right now, if it hasn't been already. Because yeah, I am not sure about that.
I'm thinking about the implicate of what would be required technically in order to train an AI to be able to recognize human anatomy and identify what needs to be cut, what doesn't need to be cut, etc.
Yeah, if it's making you cringe to think about it, obviously don't make one unless it works.
Mm-hmm.
But
I'm not cringing. I'm just thinking about the extreme complexities of the human body, particularly the parts that move, and how an AI that just isn't sapient yet, how it would recognize the parts, especially if the parts are weird from one disorder or another, even ones that are completely unrelated. I know, for example, that there's one disorder that does not cause any health complications whatsoever, but what it does is it flips which side of your body that things like your heart and your liver are. So your internal anatomy is just 180 mirrored. Or not 180, but just mirrored.
well, if you're designing it, it could just be personalized to your body. But yeah, I do get the point that you're making. That's I don't think that would be too difficult of a problem to work around. By You could probably you create some sort of software to train it to represent human form accurately. But you'd have to spend a lot of time like giving it training data.
Where would you even get the training data for anyway?
Well, scans of people's bodies, presumably through some means.
And then the scans themselves would have to be able to be interpreted by the AI in a way that allows it to be able to identify each individual component, how large it is, what their depth is, how or what's behind it, what's in front of it, what's a healthy one supposed to look like, what's an unhealthy one expected to look like, because you could easily, as I described earlier, end up with a problem of a robot trying to do open heart surgery when in reality they're trying to extract a tumor from a liver, simply because the AI thought that the heart looked unhealthy. But it turns out it's because of lighting.
Robot thinks it's delivering a baby. It's doing brain surgery.
Yes, but unfortunately that's something to consider. Not to say that the idea is doomed to fail at all. It's just that there's a lot of reasons I have to be cautious. Very, very cautious.
Absolutely. I'm just bringing up one potential approach that one could take to dealing with that problem. But yeah, medicine is, other than, I guess, the practice of surgery really just it needing to be a skill that either people need to pick up and needs to become normalized because of problems that we're going to be facing in the near future, or it's something that you need to develop a technical means of substituting with a robot, which I would say is the more likely one to get results than expecting every single person to suddenly become a fucking surgeon.
I know, and one thing that was brought up earlier is the Four Thieves Vinegar Collective and their efforts to create open source versions of existing medicines. Not just open source versions, but to be able to make them accessible to as many people as humanly possible, which thank God for that.
And yeah, the state, from what I've seen in doing my own research, the state has definitely um, has definitely used techno-strategic dialogue in order to make it look more complicated to practice medicine than it actually is. It's like it really, from what I've seen, it definitely just looks like in the practice, in the way that academics are taught how to practice surgeries, it looks like it's a couple steps more complicated than sewing in most cases. But I forgot where I was going with that. But I'm not really familiar with. I'm not really familiar, just responding to Gerson in the chat, with much of Ted Kaczynski's writings, honestly. Other than Industrial Society and Its Future, which is really just like a poor man's version of the Technological Society. In fact, I've heard apparently that Jacques Ellul was an influence on Ted Kaczynski's writings, and I don't really understand that because one of the very first concepts that Jacques Ellul addresses in the Technological Society is the distinction between technology and technique. And if you read The Industrial Society and Its Future, Ted Kaczynski does not make that distinction.
I think what happened is that Ted Kaczynski had his own understanding that existed prior to Jacques Ellul, and he just read into it what he wanted to hear. That's at least that's the impression I get, though I could be horribly mistaken there. Though in this case, it seemed to me like what was it?
It's probably because most narratives of his life present his backstory like he was obsessed with the wilderness, and that may or may not have been the case. But I've definitely noticed a very subtle attempt to try to portray it as though it's like it stems from a childhood grievance. And based on just things Ted Kaczynski himself has stated, I'm not sure if that's accurate. I mean, they also attempted to portray him as schizophrenic, and that's just flat out not accurate. That's just defaming his character, like his writings.
Light Cash Angel says, I would even say that the common medicine taught by government schools and university is wrong. Not speaking of operations. Well, yeah. I mean, you realize that the existence of pharmaceuticals as an industry is entirely because of what I would argue to be one of the most evil people to ever live, John D. Rockefeller, trying to figure out a new way to sell petroleum products, and decided to create a whole bunch of medical departments and starting entirely new universities, all for the purposes of getting them to publish studies saying like, oh, these oil pills are actually really healthy for you.
Have your baby take petroleum. It's crying too much. It won't if you do this for enough.
It won't be crying anymore.
You do this enough.
So, yeah, I mean, like, to say that there's no effect or there's no beneficial effect in any pharmaceutical product would be ludicrous. However, right now it is just the evolution of one very evil guy's obsession with trying to make as much money as humanly possible at in a way that maximizes human suffering so he can sell more of his product. I mean, John
Yeah, and if you
Rockefeller's
look
a
at
little
the
snake oil salesman. He can't say it's terribly surprising. And of course, schools are more than happy to continue. Like, this is the way you do medicine. It can only be done this way.
well, and if you look at the internal logic around how all of these methods are supposed to work, well, first of all, academic representations of psychoanalysis should all just be tossed because they're based on a school of thought called ego psychology. And I mentioned this in the last stream, but it's a school of thought which portrays the concept of the ego, which is a self-referential concept of your sense of self in your own narrative of reality. And it portrays this as though it's equivalent with the concept of self just in the abstract in psychology. Like it's the psyche itself. That's the nature of how psyches work. Um so that's I yeah, okay, I remember where I was going with that. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second there. But the internal logic around using chemical compounds as a way of trying to treat quote unquote mental illnesses is that these aren't actually like heal issues that can be treated in the brain that are caused by traumas, which are physical reactions to something that your brain was exposed to. It's just a part of your psyche. It's your disorder, quote unquote. So, but yeah, you can I'm sorry. Can you remind me where I was going with that? Sorry. What I was talking about a second ago.
You were talking about the effects of psychoanalysis
Yes.
and
Yeah.
specifically, yes,
Using chemical compounds as a form of treatment. They operate internally around the assumption that because these are just part of who you are, the way of going about treating it is only possible in the form of what stimulates chemical receptors in the brain. So the idea is that substances which will act as depressors or stimulants can be taken in a sort of strategic way to manage the issues of that person's psyche. And I am describing it in a very airheaded way because of the fact that I'm very dehydrated at the moment. But if you look up ego psychology and the internal reasoning behind using uh, chemicals as a treatment from a psychiatric perspective, based on the DSM 5 zone standards, everything that I just stated is a fairly apt summary of the thought process behind it. And you could tell just based on my description of it that it's not actually going to resolve any of these issues, and that it serves the purpose of basically just creating an industry.
like Cash Angel says, the germ theory maybe even be wrong. He believes in terrain theory. Admittedly, I'm not super familiar with terrain theory, so I can't really comment that much on it. I mean, it sounds, from what little I know, it does sound like that there's at least some merit to it, but yeah, again, I have to look a bit more closely at it. So let's see here. We covered energy, we covered food, and we covered medicine. Any other points towards self-sufficiency we want to look at?
Well, we can definitely be sharing more methods as time goes by, possibly daily through the community tab on YouTube. Just as we compile them, we're going to be sharing them. But yeah, we wanted to talk about methods that would allow anybody to become economically self-sufficient for just all four categories that we'd specified. Um, for the organization method, we were calling pens for anybody who's new or that wasn't here from the beginning. Any non-libertarian philosophy that's worth checking out? Quite a bit, but the most recent rabbit holes that I've been going down, and I think it should be fairly evident in some of what I've been talking about, is the way that Gnosticism and Neoplatonism describes the concept of emanation, and comparing that to how Buddhism and Eastern philosophical traditions describe the phenomenon of self cultivation. And I even included in the drive link the context that was required to understand this, but yeah, I do remember that, Benjamin John, just seeing your comment there. But and I even mentioned this in the drive link, but basically what I really want to elaborate on is that they're basically describing the exact same phenomenon, except what they're representing is perception in the way it creates meaning from the perspective of its genesis, but not necessarily representing the brain as a cognitive mechanism. They're simply trying to represent this process from an abstract or psychological perspective. And it's possible to better contextualize what this is now through the framework of cognitive semiotics, but I've been compiling resources from Gnostic texts and a bunch of Neoplatonist philosophers describing it to compile detailed descriptions of various quote unquote observations they've made of the phenomena or characteristics that they've noted. I bring this up because Gerard mentioned at the beginning of the stream that what we're describing sounds very similar to some of the concepts Hegel described in Phenomenology of Spirit, presumably, and that's because Hegel is taking a shot at trying to describe the same phenomenon, except he's describing perception from the perspective of Genesis in the same way that Freud is describing the nature of the psyche. In other words, he's representing them from the perspective of idealistic concepts, which is a fucked up. It's a fucked up way of representing them because it disconnects them from the nature of what they're actually trying to describe and causes them to become something like archetypes. It's the reason why most people don't fucking understand what Hegel's talking about.
I'm still under the impression that Hegel does this on purpose. Or at the very least, at some point, got it in his mind that he needed to describe it this way. Probably because it was a way. It was kind of, I don't want to say a trademark, but it kind of became the only reason that people took him seriously. Maybe it was some kind of thing going on in Germany at the time, or just in academic circles.
I suppose that's one topic that's been of particular interest to me as of late, and I'm definitely going to be going down that rabbit hole more just as I get the opportunity to experiment both with hardware that we make that can sense light in more and more through more and more abstract vectors, and also as I get more opportunities to experiment with psychedelics.
That will be interesting.
Yeah, after we actually become economically self-sufficient and have a decent network set up, haven't even really gotten into our intentions to do, to do this yet because it's not really something that we're putting much thought in at the moment. But yeah, we're going to at that point probably just be experimenting with topics of interest of our own, aside from sharing whatever methods that we come up with that would help people who are economically self sufficient, and that's going to be very weird and strange.
Alright, I'm back.
Welcome back.
How long was I gone?
I actually lost track.
For like an hour.
Oh man.
You okay?
I did it.
What's happening?
I fucking cracked self-aware AI, man.
Oh, this is new. Feel free to share.
Filthy, you fucking did it.
You mean this is something you made or something you figured out?
I just blueprinted it in my mind.
Okay.
And apparently
Filthy.
I did a thing.
When you got me those 2 4-terabyte drives, the M.2 drives, you gave me enough storage space to create an operating system fractal that self-reflects.
Oh shit.
As well as everything stored in the operating system. Imagine if you used something like Cubes OS and Artix Linux and Temple OS and React OS and Replicant OS all at the same time. Using the combined information from being able to access all of those different internets at the same time.
You would just be comparing how each individual operating system processes the internet and then comparing them against each other.
Yep. And imagine each one of those is a perception.
A perception of the infosphere. At least the human infosphere. But then again, like the human infosphere, particularly the internet, contains all the information necessary to map out how a human thinks, how a human processes information, as well as provides enough context and tools that would allow theoretically anyone to be able to replicate the process. Just imagine that if humanity were to disappear tomorrow, and the only thing that some extraterrestrial civilization who comes across Earth, the only context they have for humanity ever having existed is the current copy of Wikipedia.
Only context they have for humanity existing is the boy kisser meme and Skibbity toilet.
Oh no. Then you just create. I think that would just create the Jesus on the cross problem. They would think humanity were a bunch of freaking weirdos, and they'd be right.
That's the other thing that exists. skibbity toilet merch everywhere, and not boy kissers, minions.
Oh, no.
Skibbity toilet, and yeah, then the only other thing that exists are churches and statues of Jesus hung on the cross. And there's no people left, and aliens come to the planet, and this is all they see.
What they would conclude fairly quickly is that humanity were huge sadomasochists who were also very rich.
Oh my god, parody realities exist.
Correct. Then again, the parody only exists within one's own mind, and a parody is necessarily a relationship to another concept. Otherwise, it just simply wouldn't be a parody now, would it? There's nothing to parody, nothing to compare itself against.
And so it interpret itself like normal reality if it was aware of itself.
Yes. I mean, the whole point is to develop a self-aware reality, so... No, that term is correct. Self-aware reality. A narrative about the environment that is aware of its nature as a narrative. That's what the soul is.
So what if everything had a mind at once? Every object.
Well, it depends. What do you count as an object? Would my skin cells be aware that they are skin cells?
Yes.
How do they feel about being skin cells? Also, yes.
You end up with your with your skin communicating with you through sense of touch.
Yeah, I saw some videos, like discussing methods for developing electronic skin over the last few years that were being showed off at like trade shows.
Why would you need electronic skin? Is it like the smart fridge thing where...
Androids and like robots
Ah,
trying to create more vectors for representing sense data.
I guess
What
the
if you
question doesn't work.
actually became a replicant?
Well, I prefer to have a larger life expectancy than 5.
What if you were an open source replicant?
Oh, then I don't see the problem.
What if you could literally just hack your BioWare while you're inside it?
Omen Rose, S, are you there?
Yes, I am here.
Alright, so Omen Rose wants to know that he regrets showing you that meme.
Okay, well, it's one of the best things that's come out of the 2020s. You're still talking about it as though you think that I am looking at Boy Kisser like it's a joke. No, it's just an aesthetically pleasing character.
Its meaning has transcended your original expectation, Omen, and that is the nature of information. You can never predict how other people...
art?
No, I do like the idea of having a variant drawn in the Mousy Mice style, though. A variant.
And apparently you need...
I need to have... I need to have...
What if your persona had emojis of himself?
I I mean,
Yeah, I'll, I'll have to think of. I'm definitely for videos going to lean into the mousy mice style, but yeah, I have to think of how I'm going to do that, like beyond YouTube.
What if your cells already could be reprogrammed into nanomachines?
well, that's
Because they're already actually evolved nanomachines, and that the Grey Goo apocalypse already happened, and that's why viruses exist. And that cells 70% plus of their DNA is already viral DNA.
I mean, one thing that's always bothered me in biology class is that the way that we're taught that evolution occurs is that it's random chance, and that sometimes a mutation would occur in offspring that might cause them to die faster, might make them worse off, but sometimes it allows for an adaptation to spontaneously emerge that makes them better able to adapt to that environment. Which, I mean, fair enough, okay. It'll probably take a while, but it could be done. But then why is it that
What if
certain
you could have a
organisms have
personal nanofield?
why is it that certain organisms have more chromosomes, more DNA, and less than others? What's the selection process behind that? And I mean, I can't. That's the reason I bring that up is because I already have an answer. Viruses. They install the extra parts or remove them.
What if you turned viruses into an internet protocol?
They did. There's lots of them. There's one developed in 2004.
What if I
actively
figured out how to
hijacks.
communicate IPFS over virus?
I see no problems with this. But I worry you're describing a computer virus.
I'm talking biological virus.
Okay, good.
The reason Boy Kisser is so great is because of the fact that he works the exact opposite of of the way that a Wojak or a Pepe does, where it's supposed to cause you to create an archetype. Because of the fact that Boy Kisser is both drawn in the baby schema, which means that your brain reacts to it as though it's a character drawn in that, as though it's seeing that shape, but simultaneously there's no human features, and it's also drawn in an exaggerated cartoony style. Basically, the effect that it causes is it allows you to just perceive the internal reasoning behind why you react to it however you do, because whatever reaction you have to it is 100% just something your brain made up.
It draws attention to your own brain's functioning, whereas the Wojak and the Pepes you described, it just meant to provoke a reaction.
What if the birds are Wi-Fi routers?
The birds
But that's
real.
the reason why I. But yeah, that's the reason why I love the character so much. Not just aesthetically pleasing, but they actually, Boy Kisser serves the purpose of showing people what they are, which is why people react so violently to his presence. Well, it's one of two reactions. They love it or they react violently to it. That's the reasoning for it, though.
Anyways, I think we're about ready to wrap up the stream. We're coming up to the.
Nah, man. I got some more, man.
So
We're not done yet.
all right, well, let's go for it. This morning, I gotta go to bed soon.
When is that?
Like a couple minutes.
Alright. So, who's up for actually mass producing portable Wi-Fi routers. Or hell, why not just port up OpenWRT to computers? And then make it so that every computer acts like a Wi-Fi router. And then also reverse engineer the Wi-Fi protocol for phones. And then make it so that we can run... Okay, so there we go. So we just need a computer that can run OpenWRT, a desktop computer that can run OpenWRT, and we need a phone that is also able to implement OpenWRT. And then we then need to update OpenWRT with mesh networking capabilities. So, Filthy, do you remember the Reticulum project?
Yeah.
You know where I'm going now, right?
I think so.
So you don't remember Reticulum?
I'm trying to remember. I'm remembering bits and pieces. Yeah, it's a
Okay, someone literally created a mesh networking protocol.
Sorry, what was that?
Well,
I was just talking about how
what is Reticulum?
it is a network. It was a networking system built on top of the existing internet that allows people to be able to communicate and network over it in a way that's entirely peer-to-peer. I feel like it's a gross oversimplification, but I remember we were experimenting with it a couple months back.
Yeah, what? Yeah, literally every Internet of Things item would become an internet service provider at that point. Internet cost drops to zero. You're exactly right, right there.
Yeah, that would be at least the bare minimum of what you should aim to accomplish, is getting your costs to produce down to zero at the very least, from any sort of external needs for input.
You know, I just realized something.
What?
It kind of reminds me of discussion we were having back at I think it was FNet 1.0, for want of a better term,
Mm-hmm.
which is that a lot of people have phones in their a lot of people have phones and that they carry their phones with them in their cars. This means that theoretically, if anyone has a phone and they're driving on the highway, their phone passively becomes a Wi-Fi router, effectively turning highways and roads, which are typically going to be full or packed full of cars fairly regularly, into essentially Wi-Fi cables, for want of a better term. Now, consider what we were talking about earlier with electric cars. Not just electric cars, but just cars in general, how they're constantly adding more and more stuff. And a lot of the later models are actually requiring internet connectivity. Now consider what was just said about reversing Internet of Things as a concept and inverting its function as a surveillance tool and instead using it to reduce internet costs. The increased prevalence of things being connected to the internet, even when it's entirely unnecessary, just increases the availability of devices that could possibly be networked together. So we're looking we're not just looking at like thermostats and fridges, and in addition to computers and phones, but also cars. Essentially, the entire world is being. Essentially, the government is attempting to, and entirely unwittingly, mind you, is building the mesh network for us. and they're trying to put it on more and more devices.
I just wanted to say one last thing in chat. But yeah, other than that, I think that we can go ahead and end the stream here because I'm thinking about wrapping up for the night.
No, we're not done yet.
Oh,
Still a little long.
well, what do you want? What did you want to add? I was actually waiting for your response.
You were waiting for my response? What was the question?
I was just discussing that in response to the Internet of Things being brought up as a topic, I made the connection of, hey, the government's trying to get people to drive cars that are also connected to the Internet of Things natively. So what this means is that this is going to jailbreak all that crap. So my question to you is, how do you like them apples?
Jailbreak what?
Electric cars.
Did you know that they basically run Android Auto? Which is like, I think, a fork of Android, specifically for cars. That's even more proprietary. But the thing is, though, is that since they're basically using tablets in those cars for all of those systems in that car, that means that you could just install Linux on your car.
Sounds good to me.
Oh, actually, you could just make smart cars, like, actually smart.
Just fork, just the Tesla fork. What would you even call that? Like, just as a naming convention. I really don't want to have to go around calling it, driving a car called the Edison.
Call it a Van de Graaff.
Okay. Actually, no, actually, no, Edison might actually be a better idea because the idea of calling this proprietary corporation the Tesla is a subversion of what Tesla actually tried to do. He was not evil. Edison was evil. So let's make a car that's not evil to subvert the guy who is evil.
What if you had a privacy car? Like, what if you could actually have an RV that you could be insured was not gonna fuck you over because of proprietary parts? That you could repair yourself. And what if you could make that a flying car?
Yeah, why not? I mean, we live in the days where we have 3D printed laptops.
Tell me that isn't
so
a UFO at that point. Tell me your house wouldn't just be a UFO at that point.
Yeah, at a certain point when it becomes so easy enough to make a structure, the implications of losing one are different.
Nah, no government plates. We're gonna not with that stuff. And oh, what's that? You're gonna have to register it with the Federal Aviation. All their computers are Wi-Fi routers now.
Dude, but what if you mechanized that van?
Mechanize it how? Turn it into a humongous mecha? Because I'm all for that.
Yes.
So there we go. The Mecha Edison 5000.
If that's the name we make for the open source robot. It looks like some Dexter's Lab ass shit, man.
After all, why
Just
not?
Tom-
We're already
It's
tessellating
it's
the
called
development
that-
of humongous mecha. So why can't we
It's-
just get some Dexter's Lab mechs?
It's called that because the frame of the robot is made from parts of Thomas Edison's corpse.
No.
Listen, the only corpse I'm going to defile are that of a certain proprietor of Microsoft, who will go unnamed.
And it has the face of Mr. House. from like House MD.
I thought you were gonna go with I thought it was gonna be from Fallout New Vegas.
That too.
Just imagine showing off. Imagine showing that off at a trade show. Yeah, you thought your technology was the best. Well, I made technology based on a competing method out of your fucking corpse.
Oh my god, what the fuck?
That is the flex to end all flexes.
Fucking.
Oh my god.
Welcome to the era of Eldritch technology.
Robot. And he's made of fucking copper. And my name's just Bender.
Well, I don't think we need to go that evil. Oops.
Have the Abraham Lincoln robot be really racist.
That just means we based it off the historical Abraham Lincoln, though.
Oh no!
No, but
Have
just
you
have
ever seen those shitty B movies? Have you ever seen that really shitty B movie, Abraham Lincoln Vampire Hunter? Like,
I remember
holy
that.
fucking shit, man! People were coming out with some of the wildest fucking shit.
I've heard of the movie, didn't watch it, but I know of it.
It was so bad.
I remember you watched it with some people a few back, and I didn't participate.
What, giant animatronic Reagan statue in what's Wasteland 3?
Fallout, probably.
Oh my god.
Is,
Oh no. Harry Davis.
sorry.
Oh yes. It would be fucking epic.
No, but yeah, it would be.
Just run them over. It's what you do. Literal running them over.
If you actually look at how many times,
Stop.
and if you look at him talking about that, he brings up on many occasions the specific date of September.
The Terry A. Davis.
The specific date of September 9th, 1999. And he mentions seeing somebody glowing in the dark, and he hit them with his car. Score 1 for the good guys. Everybody just glosses over that, but I'm kind of concerned he ran over and killed somebody.
If he didn't want to get run over, he should have been glowing in the dark.
Yeah, one more time.
And
Picacario, yeah, both Doug and I kind of are.
I'm the only
Commentary.
sober one on this stream.
I've been the entire time. I just started becoming dehydrated, and the reason I haven't gotten more water is that we don't have any.
Get the water.
I have to go fucking move some stuff around. It would take like 5 or 10 minutes. But anyway, it seems like a good time to wrap up it as well, just because of how long we've been going, and we've gotten a lot discussed, but we could go into more detail, especially around methods for food cultivation.
What if I figured out how to model the genome as an operating system?
That would be interesting to see. Oh, there they are.
Yeah, we could probably discuss that in a later stream or possibly upcoming video.
Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's the thing that I've been trying to get to, and I finally got to it as of 1st of January 12th, 2025.
All right, let's end here for now. We'll see you guys next time, probably sometime in a couple days, maybe this week. Got a lot of stuff going on, so gotta be pretty active.
Yeah, we got a lot of plans, a lot of more planning. It's going to be an ongoing
I'm
process.
really gonna need
So
funding, man.
yeah,
Oh man.
yeah, Douglas, you're free to join any future streams. And I think that you doing so help you get more comfortable.
Yeah.